be item number 7.2. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, 7.2.
7.2. And the secondary suites bylaw report, so 7.1B.
Or it's already noted there as a report.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
an item, yeah.
Thank you. And there's an appendix for as well. And then this housing survey, which would be number 4.1A. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Steph, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. We're just getting started here. Connections?
Can you hear us?
Yes.
We can hear you. Can you hear us clearly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. All right, give us just 1 minute to go through a couple of procedural items and then we'll come to you in a moment.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, does everybody have any changes to the agenda as amended? No? Can I have a motion? Maureen, second. Fritz, all in favor? Yep, unanimously approved. Okay, agenda approved. Let's skip the other stuff for now, and we're going to skip straight to number 4, which is delegation. So we've got Sophee Payne from Urbanics Consultants on the line, and she's going to discuss with us the survey that they have drafted, that they've asked us to review. So Sophie, do you want to go ahead? Do you want some intros about who's around the table? We did that last time, but would you like me to just, do you want to know?
That would be a good idea, just to familiarize myself. I also had Simon with us. He just came on board.
Okay.
He'll also be working on the housing study.
Okay, was it Simon?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, great, nice to meet you, Simon.
What's your last name, Simon?
I'm sorry?
Your last name?
Oh, Lien, L-I-E-M, for Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go first. My name is Robyn Fenton. I'm the chair of the Housing Advisory Committee here on Bowen Island. I'm an architect by trade, and I also am the executive director of a local nonprofit housing society, BIRCH.
Great, thank you.
Maureen?
Hi there, I'm Maureen Nicholson. I'm one of the councillors on the committee.
And I'm Daniel Martin, and I'm the manager of planning and development here with the municipality.
Okay. I'm Fritz de Vries, architect. I have a 12-person firm in Vancouver.
I'm Alison Nixon, and I'm a member of this committee.
I'm staff clerk. Thank you for calling.
Okay, and that's it. I'll let you, Sophie and Simon, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so by a show of hands, just
Sorry,
kidding.
Sophie.
I'm interested in how many of you have read the survey, and when did you all receive it?
About 2 days ago,
Okay. So have more people read it than not, or the other way around?
I've read it.
Maybe just quick show of hands who's actually gone through it. So
Gone through it.
2, 3 out of, so half of us have gone through it closely.
Okay. Great. So I was just going to go through each question and see what the comments were, just in case those who didn't have a chance to read it based on the short turnaround. That way we can get everyone's input. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Great.
Okay. So for the first question, where do you reside now? Please choose to answer that best fits your situation. What do you all think about these options?
Could I ask Sophie how you came up with these?
So these were from a map that I found online that showed where all the different neighborhoods were.
Okay, I don't think it's complete. We have a list of neighborhoods that we use for the purposes of emergency preparedness and other planning documents. So I think if we could get that sent to you, it would cover off the island. So for example, there's Mid-Island really isn't represented here,
Yeah.
and it's an area that's called the Valley. And also Cape Roger and Curtis isn't reflected. So if we send you that list, that's essentially what the municipality has been using.
Yeah.
And I guess
Excuse
the
me,
question.
could I just interject? Sorry, you didn't allow a moment for public comment?
No, I didn't. Sorry, I did jump straight
I'd
ahead.
just like to go on record that I'm here, Robyn Berger,
Okay.
and that I'm a longtime housing needs assessment update advocate.
Okay.
Just
Thank you.
wanted to mention that.
Okay. Thanks, Robyn. I was gonna say, because yeah, I also noticed the same thing, Maureen, that several were missing. I think, and maybe Sophie can comment, or Daniel also, do we want, like, because I think there's 26 identified
Yeah.
neighborhoods, do we want 26? Or do we want to actually cluster them? Like, what's the value, Sophie, what's the value you're looking for in terms of
That's a good
neighborhood?
point. Cluster, with that number, definitely clustering it
Okay.
into meaningful clusters. As far as making the meaningful clusters, I would have to look to you all to understand what could be consolidated if we're looking at 26 different neighborhoods.
Can,
Yep,
I mean, 'cause it ends up being a lot, yeah, 20, because then we go, okay, there's, you know, do we get a respondents from Cape Fred or Curtis, maybe one.
yeah.
So Sophie, is there ability with the survey to have like a map, where we just put a map of Bowen, and we would say like, this is the green area, the red area, the blue area? Yeah, and then we'll just say you live in, you know, like, somewhere
Yeah.
this way, somewhere this
I
way.
mean, I think
and
I've been
like-
mapping exercises, and it's pretty easy to get it down to 6 or 8.
Yeah.
Like, we can cluster them into certain, you know, it's fairly easy to get that kind of clustering going. So I think, whose action item would that be? Daniel,
Yeah.
or, Daniel, would that
Yeah,
be
I can do
yours?
that.
To put together
and if I
a
do it-
cluster, a list, and maybe a map?
Yeah, and then I
Okay.
can circulate to the committee and then to Sophie,
Okay,
hopefully by the end of this week.
great, so we'll have that for you, Sophie.
Sophie, I just have a question. I'm just curious, what's the purpose of finding out what areas people live in?
This would be able to tell us if there's differences in, so looking at the rest of the survey, and it could allow us to delineate, you know, if certain neighborhoods have more challenges in a certain area than others.
Okay.
Because we can actually disaggregate the staff data. We don't have information about the individual, but we can break down each respondent's response.
Okay.
And to do that by neighborhood would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Number 2.
Which of the following describes your current dwelling type? What do you all think about these options? These options, many of them are found in the census. That's where some of them came from. Extended stay hotel is not in the census, but we were interested in if there are any vulnerable or seasonal workers maybe using this.
We don't have any.
No, so extended stay hotel is not valid at all for Bowen, we don't have anything like that.
We don't also have any apartments that are more than 5 stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why that's still in there, that's supposed to be in there. I meant to take that out. It's
We
supposed
do
to
have
be-
apartments, however, which are
Less than.
less than
5
that, like
stories.
2 or 3 even maybe stories.
We have 1 4-story.
The category that makes sense there is just simply apartment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're using Lime Survey. I don't know if you've noticed, it's a bit different than Survey Monkey. It's more secure, but it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to work with. So it's supposed to say apartments. As far as the hotel though, are hotels on Bowen, right?
No.
No.
No, there's no hotels.
No.
No, we have a couple of, like, we have one sort of lodge retreat center, we have a couple of larger B&Bs of 6 to 8 rooms, but nobody would describe them as hotels, and we don't have anything that fits that.
Okay, so let's just nix that.
Yeah.
With suites, does it make any sense to ask people about the category of suite?
Like attached versus detached?
Yeah.
That would be helpful for our purposes, yeah. So if
But
we
listen,
could,
I'm sorry to hear that.
To have secondary suite attached and secondary suite detached. Those are meaningful
as 2
categories.
separate categories.
Also, if people, in terms of apartments, it would be helpful to know if someone's in a bachelor suite or a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom.
I think that's the,
This
I think that comes
Does
later.
that come later?
I think that comes later, so let's,
Okay.
yeah, there's asked about details, so I think we
Yeah,
can get to that later,
yeah.
yeah.
So any more on this question, the second one?
No. Oh, actually, why are you asking no, why are you giving them a no answer option?
That's just, if they don't want to answer, I don't want them to feel as if the survey is not worth answering. There are some questions later on about income that some people might not feel comfortable answering. option increases the response rate.
I don't see anybody being reluctant to answer this particular question. I don't think it's helpful to have the no answer option.
And
Okay,
and
well,
that's,
I don't know if I can take it off for all of them, but I can see for sure.
Okay.
or I think, is it possible instead of no answer to say other, and then, you know, people can just not fill in the other box? Or we could say no answer / other, and then have an open box, is that an option?
If it's other, I don't know if it skews it though, because then you say
Oh,
other,
okay.
but you actually live in a single family home, you're not living in another category.
Okay, well, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, force people to do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move along.
For the next question, what are some of the pressing housing issues in your neighborhood?
So the only thing, just as a, I actually online did this survey, and there was a problem with the table. It wasn't functioning properly. So you could only put the not a problem, minor problem, major problem once. It wasn't functioning, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't allowing me to answer that for each question.
Yeah,
It was toggling, it was going the wrong axis, yeah.
you're right. That's interesting. Okay. Let me fix that. Any more on the content of that one?
I'm wondering if people would be thinking in terms of their neighborhood or in terms of the island. It's just sort of the size of this place. I'm curious
Yeah,
about
I
what
agree.
everyone else thinks.
I think for us, in this community, we tend to think in terms of the whole island. I think asking about the neighborhood is going to confuse the issue for people, because they'll start thinking, well, I don't know what it is for my neighborhood, but I might have a sense of what it's like for the whole island.
This is more
Did you say
urban.
people would not have a sense of it for their neighborhood, but they'd have a sense of it for their whole island?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you all think that that should be changed to
This seems more an urban context.
housing issues on the island instead of in your neighborhood?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of us don't tend to think in terms of what's relevant for our neighborhood, because the whole island is the neighborhood, really.
Yeah, I'm in here. Do people generally identify with an area of the island? Is it very distinct in terms of people?
No.
Outside versus other side? Are there any?
For some things,
Yeah, for some things, but
occasionally.
I wouldn't think for housing.
No, not for housing.
Yeah,
Not really.
And I think it's, you know, we're almost small enough, because we have less than 2,000 homes. So it's like, if you go to your neighborhood, well, there's 50 homes here, but I really think, I'm thinking about all of the
Yeah.
houses on the island.
And people have friendships which are across the entire island.
Yeah.
So things that are specific to neighborhoods, I think, confuse the issue.
Okay.
Like, what I'm a little puzzled about is that why isn't the question, I'm not saying one of them is right or wrong, okay? But why isn't the question, does your house need major repairs? Is your house overcrowded? Because then you actually get a precise answer, in theory.
yeah.
But
and
if
does
you
that-
estimate,
Yeah.
if you have to just go on your judgment, if your neighborhood, the houses need repairs or not, first of all, is that relevant? That's not the person who is in need.
Yeah.
But like, I
So
just don't know
there-
what it tells you.
There's a later
There's a
question
later
that's
question.
about your living conditions.
Yeah.
It's the same questions come again. Yeah, it's the first
Similar.
time I've
This
heard
is
of
more
this.
like perception, yeah, this is
Yeah,
like
perception.
opinion.
Perception.
So yeah, I think you guys are, like, I think we're getting on the right track, that I think this would be housing issues on Bowen in
Yeah.
general. Do homes need major repairs? I'm
Yeah.
not sure, is that a relevant question for all of Bowen?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
how do
not
you-
sure.
How do you judge that? I just don't know.
Because,
how-
it's a complete mixed bag, like, sure, there's a percentage that are old cabins that have been hodgepodge renovated and converted to full-time use, but then there's a whole bunch that have been built in the
Well,
last
if you
20
ask
years
the-
and are really high quality.
If you
so-
ask the building inspector, he'd probably give you
Yeah.
a better answer.
So I'm not sure that the first one is, well, I'm just trying to think ahead, if we get people to answer that, is it of value to us? Like, what
Yes.
does it actually, what information does it give us in the end if people say, oh, it's a major problem that homes need repairs, or it's a minor problem, or it's not, I don't know if there's any value in that first one. Are homes overcrowded? I'm not sure that that's relevant, I don't know that there's harm in asking it, but,
Well, how you answer that, there's homes with hardly anybody in it, because it's
Yeah,
part-time.
so it's almost
And
underused.
there are homes that,
Yeah.
as a result, may be overcrowded.
so maybe, Sophie, we have to do both, we have to say, are they overcrowded, and then are they underused? Because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can see a
Yeah.
significant answer of people saying
This
it's a major problem that there's houses underused
Yeah,
on
but
our
they're two
island.
separate questions,
And
right?
two separate questions, and that would be interesting, right? I think that could provide some interesting data.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And homes are too expensive, yeah, sure,
We all know
we'll
the
see what the
answer
answer
to
is to that one.
Is there a question around rental security?
I actually have a comment on that a bit on a later question, and I think
Okay.
it'll come in when we talk about current living situations.
All right.
Agreed. I think that, well, if you're thinking for housing issues,
Is a
like
general,
as a general question,
for people who are renting, how secure is your rental and it could be like
Or-
1 to 10?
I mean, maybe this is so. The question is, what are some of the pressing housing issues?
yeah.
It could be like lack of
Lack
available rentals,
rentals.
Yes.
and people could say, well, it's not a problem, it's a minor problem, it's a major
Yes.
problem. Maybe that's the question.
Yeah,
in this
maybe that's-
category.
That's a good idea, Daniel. Does that make sense, Sophie and Simon?
Yeah, did you say, sorry, sometimes it's a little hard to hear.
Yeah.
Did you say, add, is there difficulty finding additional rental housing?
Yeah, something. Yeah, however
Some-
it's worded, like, is there available or lack of available rental
Yeah.
or housing?
Yeah, something along those lines. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then homelessness, near homelessness, I think that's a good question. Provision of services? Yeah, that's how hard, especially lumping them all in together, road, sewer, water, electricity, like, that they're all quite separate issues on Bowen, and I think to lump them together into a, a not problem, minor problem, major problem isn't valid, isn't useful.
I would take that question out.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily, well, yeah,
I-
I would vote for taking it out.
Yeah.
Fritz would, Allison, Maureen, Daniel, do you feel differently?
Sophie, why did you want it in there?
What was that?
Why did you want that particular question, the provision of services?
It kind of affects how development might take place on the island if we're looking at new housing options, and what the perception is from the residents that live there.
Okay, if you wanted to do that, guys, I think it is meaningful to ask about sewer and water. I don't think it's meaningful to ask
Yeah.
about roads and electricity. And if you're asking about sewer and water, I
Yeah.
think you should separate them.
And
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Maureen.
Okay.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, and then sufficient housing options for people with different needs. I think that's a good general question. I don't think it has to get much more specific to you.
I would like to split that in more, like in general, are there sufficient housing options? And it is more what type of accommodation? But then if you go to older people and accessibility, I would make that a separate question.
Okay, yeah, I think that could be
Because it is
valid.
ground oriented and it is kind of a different.
And I think we did something on the BIRCH housing survey last year, so that could be a good comparator to see if there's been a change.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sophie, does that make sense? If we
sorry,
take,
can you just repeat that to me, Stan?
Yep.
I have a hard time hearing.
so if we split it into, are there sufficient housing options, period? So that would be about, different housing options, apartments, condos, duplexes, bungalows. And then a second question, are there sufficient housing options for people with mobility issues and accessibility issues?
Okay,
Because I think, yeah, they're two distinct questions.
okay.
And then the final one, are there too many vacant lots in my neighborhood? I'm not sure that that's a useful question for us. Do you have any strong feelings, Sophie, that should be in there?
No, because we're gonna touch on if there's underutilized.
Yeah, I think that's maybe more relevant.
Yeah, because I think it's like in our recent new subdivisions, there's more vacant lots because they're not built out, and in existing ones, there's few.
Yeah.
So it's like,
So it's pretty cut and dry
Yeah.
where there's vacant lots and not. Okay, so let's nix that one. Okay,
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
sure, a brief one, Robyn?
Yeah, regarding provision of services, I think you might want to put something related to transportation in link it to services.
Yeah.
Okay,
Accessibility by, transportation, because they're quite linked on the island.
good, thank you, that's a good comment.
After
Does that-
the sewer and water.
Yeah, does that make sense, Sophie? The comment was, in connection with the services, sewer and water, could we add a third one that would be about transportation?
Sure. What about transportation?
I think that maybe just, do you feel satisfied, like, are you satisfied with your transportation options? That kind of, or and it's, because we're asking about not a problem, minor problem, major problem, it's pretty high level.
But
So-
do you actually mean public transportation, or do you mean transportation?
It could be all transport, because these are general issues.
I'm-
Yeah, but you have
That's all.
to know what, no, I think it should say
Because if
public,
you,
because
Yeah.
otherwise, what do you
Public,
do?
So it'd say like, is the provision of
Yeah.
public transportation
Public
an issue?
and that includes the ferry, because if you live in Snug Cove, it's different than if you live in Blue Water.
Yeah,
Yeah, then, but do we want to say maybe, and the only reason I'm hesitating is, I agree, public transit for sure. I'm thinking alternative transport modes, so not cars, because that's kind of the default, right,
Well-
on the island is cars.
yeah.
But because we want to include cycling and walking and those kinds of things, like,
Well, but if you want a yes or no,
yeah,
and if you say, if you leave the question the way it is, right, the yes or no don't mean anything. Because in one case, you have to provide more public transportation, and in the other case, you have to provide more parking maybe, whatever, right? So if you say from public transportation, in my mind, is something you can respond to. Cycling and walking infrastructure, you can respond to. But if you put it so general, I just don't know what to do with the answer.
well, and my question is, so I'm just thinking out loud here, this is a housing survey, not a transportation survey.
Right.
So I don't know that we want to get into details of, like, I thought, oh, should we ask, I was going through, should we ask a separate question about, public transit, transportation options? But then they were getting into a transport
Yeah.
survey, right? So I don't want to, I'm trying to figure out how do we balance that? What is the question? So it's,
Like to give you an example, right?
Yeah.
Like if you build affordable housing somewhere, but you built it, but it doesn't really work because the public transport doesn't work.
yeah,
right? So the idea that if you get specific answers about public transport, that means that people that don't have the mobility to use a car wherever they want to go at any time they please, that may affect where you build what.
yeah.
You see what I mean?
This isn't,
But-
I'm
So,
not,
Robyn, sorry,
I'm not
I'm gonna ask you
surprised.
to not interrupt. I can see when you put your hand up, and I'm gonna call on you, but, and I appreciate your input, but we do have discussions happening, and I'd rather if you didn't interject, please. So, what would you like to say on this thought?
I wasn't suggesting that this be a transportation survey.
Mm-hmm.
I just suggested you might put a question linking it to housing, because it's an issue.
Yep, that's completely understood. That's what we're discussing. Maureen?
I support that suggestion really strongly, and I do that for a number of reasons. Like, one of the most important pieces of research that came out of Metro Vancouver in recent years had to do with the housing transportation burden on people, and the affordability of that whole package had to be looked at. And transportation is one of the key things that is part of housing policy in Metro. So what I would suggest, because I don't think we're going to actually get very meaningful responses to a question about transit in here, but I think the importance is raising awareness of the survey takers of the relationship between transit and housing, and that they're of a piece. So if we ask a question to something like, is sufficient provision of public transportation an issue, which puts it in the same sort of language as water and sewer. So water, sewer, transportation all need to be thought about when you're trying to figure out housing.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Sophie?
Could you summarize that? Sorry, it's hard to hear sometimes.
Yeah, is sufficient provision of public transportation an issue?
Okay.
Okay?
Would it be useful to further qualify the question in relation to the housing situation, or is it something that you would like to have as a standalone question?
I think if we're just asking a question like, is the provision of sewer services an issue? Is the provision of water services an issue? Is the provision of public transportation an issue? I think it's clear enough.
Yeah. It's pretty high level, right?
Yeah.
It's just getting some general feedback. Yeah. Okay, good, I'm happy with where that landed. Everybody else?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
All right, good for question 4 then.
Oh, and that was my other comment, these aren't numbered.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can add that in, or, I mean, it may not matter after this revision's done, but just from a point of view, it was a little hard to follow them and talk about them when they're not numbered, but.
And they're not numbered yet, I didn't put that in yet.
Okay.
So with this one, how many people, including you, currently live in your household within the following age groups? Any comment on this?
Good question.
Yeah, my only thing is, does it align with the census data? Because the census data has pretty particular categories, right? And I feel like they're different from this, and like, I don't know what the 14 and less, and then 15 to 34 seems slightly like an odd separation. Like, I feel like the maybe 18, 19 and under is more relevant, and then, you know, anyways, maybe I could just ask you to review it in line with the census data. Is
Yeah,
that-
so the census does use 14 or younger, and then the working age population is 15 to 64, but having a chunk between 15 and 64 is much too big.
Yeah.
That down, and then the 65 and older is also the census. So we can change those categories if it's more meaningful for Bowen Island.
Well, I guess so, that's it. Daniel, you look like.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, because I think,
My son's
I mean, I can see the census, yeah, does that, 0 to 14, 15, 64, but it seems like we wanna know, do you have school kids?
Yeah, I feel like that's more relevant.
Yeah, so I would go, you know, even if we go,
19 to
It's-
34.
yeah, but I don't, like, I don't know if it's just go
No.
19 or less, or if we have 2, and you go like,
Yeah, elementary school, and when did it go? I don't know.
yeah, and then who's going to high school?
Yeah, that actually could be
Oh,
a
that's
useful
But-
question for Bowen.
That's
I mean, the
right.
census
So,
goes,
What would that
like,
be, 12 and under
the
kind of thing?
census
or
goes
under
5
13?
to 9, and they go 10 to 14.
No.
But I don't know if it's still that, if it's like 0 to 14, and then it's like 15 to 19.
No, I think for Bowen, the moment your kids go off the island,
Right,
it makes
yeah.
a big difference.
So should we say 0 to 12?
What about elementary? And
Yeah, if
high
the-
school age?
Yeah, do we, well, because we want
I
to
would
capture
put by
all of them.
years.
it's kind of the same question.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you went 0 to 12 and
And then
3
13
to 19.
to 19, and then we
Yeah.
can go in whatever
19 to
categories you
34,
want.
yeah.
Yeah, I just wonder if the 35 to 64.
And 64 is pretty big.
Yeah, because like, I can see that the younger generation is more tight with money. I'm not sure if that's totally true, but it would be interesting
Well,
to see how that
I
relates.
think, well, no, I think it's like a 35-year-old is probably in a very different housing and financial situation than a 64-year-old on this island, right?
Yeah,
I think that's
or
what
maybe
you're
over
getting at.
50 or over 55.
So I'm wondering if it
or
should be 35 to 50, 50 to 65, that kind of thing?
something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there,
35, oh god, my pen's dying. So like 15, does that make sense?
So it was 0 to what? Can we-
To
I think
12.
we'll go back and
Yep.
just submit what these numbers
Sure.
are.
So if we went 12 years or less,
Okay.
and then went
12
13
or
to,
less,
and then 13 to
then-
19.
13 to 19,
Yeah?
and then 20 to 35.
Yeah,
Yeah,
or 34,
34.
whatever the rounding is, yeah.
And then it was
35 to
35
35 to 50.
to, what was it,
50,
60?
50, 50.
50.
If you want it aligned with the census, it's 35 to 49.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah,
good to
I think
hear.
that's good, keep it at the 35 to 49, 50 to 64, is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Maureen?
Yeah.
And then 65 plus, I feel like that's, do we want to delineate anything? Do we want to try to capture 75 plus or 80 plus? Is that useful? I mean, it might be
These
considering.
people over 65, they're all over the place.
Well, I mean, the only reason I say it is because I don't know how many of those people will be taking the survey, so I'm not sure. But I only say it because thinking of Sunco House is being built,
Yeah.
and they're aiming for, I think, 70 plus, 75 plus. It might be useful information for them, because imagine who's using this document. It might be useful information for them to know who's, like, what would be our next category? Would be 65 to 80,
Yeah.
and then 80 plus. I think knowing the
The
80 plus
census-
population.
Yeah, the census
Oh.
group's at 85 and older. So if
Okay.
we went 65
Let's
to
align with that.
84,
Yep,
and then 85 or older.
perfect, thanks Daniel. Yeah, let's keep it aligned with the
Yeah.
census where possible. Yeah.
Why is it going to 8 to 19 and not 18, 13 to 18 is high school, and then 19 is.
Yeah, and I guess
university
18,
that year.
19's, it depends when your birthday falls, right? And kind of, so you've
17,
done it.
18, you're in grade 12, 18, 19, you're out.
Do you feel strongly that it's a,
I just feel like that's the
I
next
mean, that's
step
just part
out
of
of
it's
the
just
house.
lining up with census
Right.
it's
stuff.
just not, yeah, I think that's,
For the slow kids.
Oh.
So with the last one
We're not
was it
judging.
50 to 64, and then 65 over, and then 80 plus?
So 65 to 84,
Okay,
and then an 85 and older.
okay. And so it was 50 to 65,
64.
or yeah, 64. And then 85 plus, okay, great. That's pretty much in line with the census.
It
Yeah.
is.
Good. Okay, anything more on that one?
nope.
Well, how many years have you lived in your current home? And it goes between less than 1 year to 20 years or more.
I think that's
Seems
fine.
to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what is your current living arrangement?
I have some comments on this one.
What does stable mean?
Yeah,
It means horses.
depends on the earthquake situation.
In a barn?
What does it mean, Sophie?
Security in their residence.
Okay, people won't understand that
Yeah.
that's what's intended.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very emotional and psychological as opposed to security and tenure. So I wonder if maybe, yeah, it's more about,
Well, especially there's no option for I live in an unstable home
Yeah.
with family.
yeah, and there is a typo, just there's a double entry,
Yeah.
right? So I think that maybe, I feel like is secure tenure a little more of a common, like a term, I'm looking at the committee here at the table, like a secure rental is a really clear term.
Yeah.
And, I
Yeah,
mean,
there's secure rental and insecure rental.
yeah,
I've seen questions like, how secure, it's usually graded 1 to 10. How secure do I feel in my rental accommodation?
mhm,
And I think that deserves a separate question.
I agree. You've got two things going on here, which is the type of your arrangements and then the security of your arrangements.
mm.
And separating them out, I think would be
Yeah.
useful.
Yes. So
The
just,
security piece comes in a few questions later when it asks what percentage of your income is.
that's a different
Yeah,
question.
so
The
that's-
issue,
yeah,
the issue here is for people who are renting in someone else's home. And what happens often on Bowen is you might be renting an apartment or a basement, and then the person that you're renting from turns around and says you're going to sell, and you're out.
mhm,
Yeah,
The first few years we were here, we moved every year because of that.
yeah.
I see, okay.
That's
So-
a different issue.
I think, agreed, I think maybe to quickly summarize this, if you could ask one question about what's the physical, like, is it a single family house, a duplex, you know, are you renting a room in a house, like those kinds of, just a very basic, what is it?
So that's asked earlier. We just
Oh,
looked at
yeah,
that.
did we do that?
Yeah.
Sorry, oh, yes, you've already asked that. So then I think it would be, this question would be more about, the security of tenure, and then you could ask, and I think you get at it in the next question about, do you own or rent? So I think those are, so we've already asked what kind of building you live in, what kind of dwelling you live in. Now we're asking about, is it secure? And then we ask,
I would do the security after the rental. Ask, do you
ask
own,
first, do you own or rent?
do you own a rent? And then
Yeah.
for people
Okay.
who rent,
That's true.
how would you grade the security of your rental?
Yeah, from like a 1 to 10 or something.
Yes, something like that.
Does that make sense, Sophie?
Yeah, so the next question, we can rate or no, actually, in the question we're talking about right now, a rating system of your security with that housing situation?
Yeah.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, and it's more
Mhm.
relevant to people who are renting than people who own their own homes.
Yeah.
That's a different issue around the relationship of their income to their housing.
Yeah, and Sarah, we have the member of the public, Robyn, did you have a comment that you wanted to give us on this?
Well, I think you could maybe, the question prior, how many years have you lived in your current home?
Yes.
I think you could somehow link that to rentals by how many times have you had to, because some people have rented here for years and only lived in their current situation a year, but they've been bumped around several times. So I think there's ways of linking the unstable nature of rentals to one of these questions is pretty important.
Yes.
Okay.
How many times have you moved?
How many times
Yeah.
have you had to move?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's good.
I'm making a note of that, I'm gonna come back to it, but just to come back to what we were saying on this current question about what is your current living arrangement, what I'm seeing is maybe a couple of these options should actually go back to question number 2. So you said, which of the following best describes your current dwelling type? We actually don't have, I am homeless or live in a shelter in that question. And I think maybe we should shift that answer back over there. I live with friends or family on a temporary basis, I couch surf. I think that should go back into that first question, because that's actually where we're determining, like right now, as of today, what is your housing situation?
Yeah, so let's make this question about the security of tenure and take these, arrange it pieces and put them in 2.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
so take those into there. This question will be about stability on a rating system. And then I think the question could just be, do you own or do you rent? And I think, like Allison suggested, I bring that in before the security question.
Okay, so the next question is, do you own or rent the place you live? Are you saying take that question and precede it with the one we're talking about as opposed to putting it after?
Exactly, yeah. And it should be very simple. I think it just can be, do you own or do you rent? I think we've covered the, I rent a room, or, I mean, it could be I rent a room, that's fine, but I think we've covered the other stuff. Yeah.
And just a comment on one of the options in 6, we don't actually have work camps
Yeah.
on Bowen, so that shouldn't appear anywhere.
Yeah, I was trying to think, I don't even think there's anything that you could describe as a work camp or anything, and we don't actually have a shelter either.
Yeah.
So, I don't think those are valid options, shelter or work camp, but I do think camping is a valid question. And you could say camping / maybe, do we want to say on a boat or something, or we just?
Yes.
On a
Yeah.
boat?
Yeah.
Because there are people, and is that separate? So camping's one, living on a boat is separate. Because there's certainly people who live on some liveaboards that are appropriate, but there are some people who live on, not properly weatherized boats. But a work camp might strike, and a shelter I would strike, because we just don't have those. And then I don't want to lose that thing that Robyn brought up about, can we ask a question, and I don't know how to word this, about how many times have you moved since living on the island? Is that the answer we're looking for? So if we get low numbers, 1 or 2, then but if the average is like, 10, and then I know you can correlate that with, if somebody answers I rent, and then you look at those, you know what I mean? If you select by the people who answered I rent, and then you look at how many times they've moved, that could give us some information. Does that make sense, committee?
Are we asking like in the last 5 years or some timeline? Like say, the last 5 years, how many times have you moved or something?
Is
Rather than
that
just like.
fine?
Let's make it
Is
10.
10?
Let's
I think
make it
10.
10.
Is a better timeline?
I think it's
Is it moved or
10?
had to move?
I think moved, we could get it, I
Yeah.
mean, we could get into the, maybe, so do we say, how many times have you moved in the last 10 years, and it's an open space? How many of those moves were forced moves? Is that relevant? Because I think that's, Robyn, do you have a comment?
You might want to relate it to the last needs assessment update.
Yeah.
So since that time frame, how many times have you had to move? Because there's updated information prior to that. Just a suggestion.
And that last needs assessment was in 2008?
Yeah.
Except that people might not necessarily have remembered when that needs assessment is.
No, I don't say related to the needs assessment, but just the time frame. Say
Right,
10 years.
10 years.
10, 12 years,
Okay, good, so that makes sense for the 10 years. And I think if we could, so if we can ask, how many times have you moved in the last 10 years? And then how many of those moves have been forced? Is that the right wording, everybody? Or have not, you know what I'm trying to get at, right? Maybe Sophie, Simon, you can word it, but it's we're wanting to know how many, because people move because they want to move, but a lot of times on Bowen, people move because they have to. They're given notice and they're forced to move, and it's a real issue, like we were saying with the rentals, the house goes up for sale, people are given notice, they have 2 months to scramble and find something else, and that's one of a really big issue for rentals, so if we can somehow capture that. Can we leave it to you to do the wording?
Yeah, and there's
But
a
you
question
just said it,
later
give
on
you
about
notice.
moving, and I'll just work it into that,
Just give it.
or I'll see what I can do as far as getting that piece from our respondent.
Okay, great. And then, okay, yep, why do you live on Bowen Island?
If you live on Bowen Island, this is meant to capture what our other quantitative questions might not. And is there any comments on this piece?
The question's in the wrong place. It's in the middle of a whole bunch of factual stuff. So
Right.
I'm not sure where to put it, but maybe we could come back to that.
Yeah, agreed, I think, and it just depends, because obviously if you put it at the end, you might not get a lot of people entering it, because everybody's exhausted from doing the survey. Whether you put it at the beginning, maybe asking what neighborhood you live in, and then why do you live on Bowen, and then get into all the heavy data, that would be, I think that's a great suggestion, Maureen. Yeah.
What were you expecting to get by that question?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, we asked that in our last survey. It's a bit open-ended. I can't always expect what we're going to get, but I think it's right to set it in the beginning. It kind of sets the stage for the survey before we get into the more technical piece. But
It is a very open-ended
Also,
question.
indications of who might want to move to Bowen Island and what type of population you might be expecting, considering who's come there in the past and who's there currently.
Oh, that's interesting. So what this clicked for me was if you separate it by, say, people who've been here for 5 years or less, and you get their answers, which might be, for example, affordability, good schooling, whatever, and then you separate it into people who've been here for 20 plus years, and they say, you know, recreation trails, quiet rural lifestyle. Is that the kind of information you're hoping to get?
yeah, that could be helpful. And we do ask how long. I believe here we ask how long people have lived on Bowen Island. So
Yeah.
it's segregate the data and see, you know, by how long they lived here, what they said in this question.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
can you just, like what you were just saying, Robyn, right? Like you phrase the question, right?
Yes.
And a person can actually say yes or no,
Yes.
right? And that way you can actually count your answers instead of getting all kind of wishy-washy answers. So like if you work on the island, yes or no? Are you here because the schools are good, yes or no? And you just discuss questions.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, I wonder if that might be more useful, Sophie and Simon, if there's certain things, and maybe there's standards out there from other reports you've done, or I'm not sure, but yeah, like affordability, schools, recreation, environment,
Safety.
ocean, safety, whatever we think those, like whatever might be useful. I agree, maybe that, rather than an open-ended question, because like we've done surveys, and you see the comments that come from these open-ended questions, and how in the world do you wade through them? Whereas if you had, say, a list of 5 to 10, attributes, and you had whatever it is, yes or no, or 1 to 5, or something like that, you could get a sense of, which of those attributes are important to which people. And sorry, just complete side note, I think the question was how many years have you lived in your current home? I think the how many years have you been on Bowen is an equally valid additional question.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I'm just writing this down.
I'm going to argue in favor of keeping a more open-ended question,
Okay.
in part because it just gives a little breathing room in the survey, and I think that there would be an expectation on the part of the survey takers that they would have that opportunity. It does result, and we need to be prepared for this, it does result in a heck of a lot of feedback. Bowen Islanders love to give feedback in these kinds of surveys. But I was wondering about the question itself, and I wonder if it might make sense to have 2 questions there. One being, why did you move to Bowen Island? And some people will say, I've always lived here and so on. But if you ask them, why did you move to Bowen Island? And then ask them, why do you stay on Bowen Island? I think that might result in richer answers because it's a slightly different set of questions that have been asked in recent surveys.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, just a suggestion.
Yeah. I'm sort of getting nods around the table. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so,
You know,
Oh,
the question
sorry,
still
hold on,
is
Sophie,
like,
Fritz?
how does it relate to assessing the housing, right? Like, there may be, there's all people that just like to live on Bowen, right? And they may be here full-time, part-time, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then there's people who have to live here because of their situation, because they work here, or
Yeah, or
you know,
family,
or
or
they want to go
whatever.
to school here, whatever they do, right? So
Yeah.
like, I'm saying is that, is there something that you actually want to get out of that answer?
Mm.
But I mean, I like the idea of a more general question, but at the bottom there's a second general question. It says, do you have any other comments, questions, concerns, including any housing issues and opportunities
Great,
that you would like to highlight? So
yeah.
maybe that's a nice, maybe that should be changed a bit, but in the survey itself, like, I mean, I like what Maureen was saying, but then can you make it kind of specific that you know why you asked that question in relationship to housing?
But I think I like the, why did you move to Bowen Island? Because I guess
Yeah.
it's like a housing need, it's like needs and demands in essence, and it's saying these are the demands for
Yeah.
housing, like this is why people have come here.
Yeah, but you come here for work, pleasure. I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
question,
Yeah,
but then
yeah.
you can still give them preset answers, or you don't. But if you want to be more clear, then you would give an option. I mean, I don't go to Bowen for work, right? I go to Bowen because I like to be here, right?
But I think it's
But
possible,
somebody
like I
else
said,
will say, I have to go to Bowen Island because there's my freaking work is there.
but I would say, you know, like, I would have answered it, I would say, well, I moved to Bowen for work and because I wanted to live on Bowen, right? It's not like a.
Yeah. So I guess the
moved
big
for a
thing
job, but
is,
it's not- Yeah.
I don't want to dwell too long. Do we leave it as an open-ended question? And I really like Maureen's suggestion. Why did you move to Bowen?
Yeah.
Why do you stay on Bowen? And then if there's value in a separate question about amenities and all that stuff, but I'm not sure, again, thinking about housing. Yeah, maybe Sophie, Simon, again, can we leave it to you as the experts? Is it best as open-ended question, or is it best to include, and one of them could include some answers and then an open comments box? But if you,
I actually think we can do both, so.
yeah, so if there's specific things like recreation, community, work, you know, school, whatever those, you think some categories might be useful to have that survey data, but then for sure leave an open comments box that people can leave an open-ended answer. And I think the why you stay should be kind of open-ended, that can be, and it just, yeah, I think it just could be telling to get those answers.
There's also an assumption that everybody moved to Bowen Island and nobody already lived here.
Well, yeah, and there's certainly a few who were born here and have probably always stayed, so, yeah, that's certainly possible.
Actually, amongst our youth,
They'd have fun answering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh, any more on that before we move on?
nope, I think we're done.
What is the size of your home? And this is asking for the number of bedrooms, the number of full bathrooms, and approximate square feet, as well as what year this home was built.
My initial thought was the last one is that people may not know when their home was built. And so some way to not answer that or put,
Approximately how old?
yeah.
Yeah. And
Or
you know
I
what?
guess you could say approximately what year was your home built, maybe, because.
And people can, I don't know if it's worth putting in brackets or something, it's very easy to go online to BC Assessment and look up your property, and they generally have an estimated age for your house.
people will
Whether
do
that's
that.
accurate or not,
People will not do that.
yeah.
No,
But I
yes.
think, as long as it's optional, as long as you don't make that a required category, that people just might not put it in.
Yeah.
So as long as that's not a problem, yeah.
Can I ask why you're having, are people actually going to be typing in 3 bedrooms, for example?
It says
They're just
only
going to be
numbers.
typing in 3.
They'll type in the number 3, I think.
I'm wondering why you don't have preset categories here. I think it would make the data analysis easier.
For those first two.
Actually, it creates an average of the numbers that people type in. So it's easier when we have an average and median number as a result of what people are typing in.
So the end data will be an average of bedrooms as opposed to us knowing what the stock is in terms of, this is how many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms we have? Will that come in somewhere?
Yes, we'll have access to both the number, the mode and the median and the average.
But at the top it says only numbers may be entered in these fields.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
So that's a number.
Don't want to leave that.
And I do remember when I tried it out online, it did force me, like I couldn't just put a random it did force me to put certain numbers in.
Mhm.
Sorry, Maureen, you're still looking concerned.
Will you be, I guess, and I'm just, again, thinking about the analysis of this. If you get an average and you're reporting the average, will you be able to look at the results from all of the people who have a one-bedroom
Yeah.
home? You will be able to do that.
Yeah.
Will it not be easier to do that if you actually have the categories broken out? And
It's
you're-
not any easier to do it that way.
It's not?
No.
Okay.
But there's a question here, what year was your home built? Now I'm renting, how do I fill that out?
Yeah.
So,
I think
like-
maybe put optional on that one, because I think that might throw a lot of people.
Okay, sure. I can't remember. I'll check to make sure it's optional.
Yeah.
I feel like if you say approximately 10 years ago, approximately 20 years
Yeah,
ago,
and
it's
maybe-
easy, but if I
yeah.
just say 1970, 1980, I feel like I'm lying.
Yeah.
You know,
And I
like,
think, so maybe
how
add the
old
word
versus-
approximately how old, and in brackets optional. Because again, we just don't want to scare people off, people can put it in if they want. I'm not sure how important that data point is, or if there's census data, or if BC Assessment has that. So I don't know how important that is to capture in this survey.
Okay, sure. We can add approximately.
And if you write, what is the size of your home? I'm still renting, okay? What's the size of your home? Number of bedrooms. Now, two people may be filling this out, the owner and the renter. So I don't know, there's something missing here.
No, you just enter it for your home, I think. Like if I own a house on Bow that I'm renting to somebody, I wouldn't fill it in to.
You would fill in all, I would just answer the questions, if they're rented out or not, that's the number of bedrooms you have. If you
Yeah,
rent
I
it-
think the
I'm
only-
saying is that there's something here that doesn't make a distinction between owning and renting, and if you don't want to do that, these questions have to be better thought out, I think.
I think the only place that would be a problem is like a person renting a room, right? Because then they might describe, I live in a 3-bedroom house, I rent one room, and then you might get the person who owns that 3-bedroom house filling it in. So we might get a little bit of overlap. I don't think that would be a huge issue, but I feel like if, say, you have a house and a suite, like I have a 2-bedroom house with a 1-bedroom suite, I'm gonna say I live in 2 bedrooms, and then I would encourage my tenant to do the survey, and he could say, I have a 1-bedroom
Well,
suite.
as long as you explain that, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will just tell them how many rooms there are in their
In the
house.
whole thing, so somebody in my house might say 3.
You have to be
Okay, so
specific on it.
maybe, Daniel, did you, no, oh, sorry, it looked like you
No,
wanted to
no.
jump in. So maybe, Sophie, could we be a little more specific about,
Let's change it to living space or something like that. I can clarify it.
yeah, something like your dwelling or your living space, you know, and maybe you have to put a little explanation note to say, you know, if you have a suite that's separately occupied, don't include that kind of thing. Only include your self-contained areas. Maybe does that, just a little explanation?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, and this next question goes into what do you pay for housing per month excluding utilities?
And I thought, my only comment on this one is, I think, could you provide a small explanation note that would say, and I know you said excluding utilities, which is useful. If I rent, it's obviously my rent, that's pretty straightforward. If I own, is it only my mortgage payment? Is it my mortgage and my property taxes? Because that's kind of how I measure when I look at rent versus mortgage and property taxes. And then, I know there's maintenance as well, so like, I think you should provide a note that would say, this includes rent, and this includes mortgage and property taxes, period. Or, like, you can tell us which best to include, but I think an explanatory note would be usful.
You have to split this between renting and not renting.
Okay?
Because you want to know what people pay for rent,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
But you don't really care how much people spend per year on their
But
home.
we already know that, and they can separate it. We have a question that says, do you rent, do you own? So then they can click on the people that rent, and this information will come up, and then they can click the people that own, and this information comes up. So I think it can be the same question, that it's
Okay,
just saying,
sure.
how much do you spend? If you're a renter, it's your rent. If you're an owner, it's mortgage and property taxes.
Yeah, but so then
Does
when
that, yeah,
it's
Fritz?
true, but when this comes up then, it has to be clear that it is for the homeowner. And if it comes up and you're renting, it has to be clear that it's for the renter. Because otherwise, I would still have the same question.
So Sophie, can we capture, like, can we put an explanatory note that
Yeah.
says, if you rent, this is for this, if you own, it's for this?
Yes.
And they're
Right.
just straight up categories about dollar amounts per
And
month.
could I argue that it's not mortgage and property taxes, it's simply mortgage?
Yeah.
Because I think, if my recollection is correct, the 30% affordability is not based on including
Yeah, I don't
property
think so.
taxes.
Okay, I'll defer to the experts on that one. You tell us what that measurement and comparison should be.
So the census shelter cost says, for owners includes where applicable mortgage payments, property taxes, and condominium fees.
Oh, it does.
And then it goes in and utilities, and for renters, it includes the rent and the cost and utilities, essentially.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what it's-
and you use that.
So- do you
I
wanna-
actually, sorry, that was one of my other comments was, either do we include or separately, again, I don't want us to be like a 40 question survey, so I get that we're, I don't wanna add too much, but on Bowen, utility costs are significant for some people. Like, people who live in older homes pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to heat in the winter, versus there's some people who live in small apartments or newer builds that would pay much less than that. So, I don't know where that fits. Does that fit in here? Sophie, what's the reason why you specifically said excluding utilities? Is there a rationale, or did it align with something?
We wanted to get the raw number there, and since it can change so much on personal behavior, yes,
Yeah.
older homes typically need more, larger homes need more, but we wanted to isolate that. But we can include something surrounding utilities, but that's getting a little bit outside the scope of
Yeah.
focus on housing.
Yeah.
It kind of, you picked up on that it would relate to if people are living in older homes or homes that are not energy efficient. But that's not exactly what we're trying to get at here.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate that. My big concern is, it's a significant cost to people. So if somebody's renting a small 2-bedroom cabin that was never really meant for winter and they're renting it for $1,500, but they're spending $500 a month in the winter on electric heat and wood to heat the place, versus somebody who's living in a more modern 2-bedroom apartment and they're paying $2,000 a month, right? It might look on the face, and they pay $50 a month for their electrical heat. It might on the face look like, oh wow, they're paying $2,000 a month for that, and these other people are paying $1,500, but in reality, their actual costs of living there. So anyways, that's my 2 cents. Unless anybody feels strongly, let's leave it to them to.
But what I do feel is that the questions for renting are far more important than
Okay.
for the home ownership, because that is so complicated to sort out if somebody can afford their house
Except
or
it's
not.
useful for comparison purposes.
Yeah, but it's hard to get the data, I think, because
Because you can get, you have a graph that can show if for the people on this island who own their properties, the bulk of them are paying this much percentage, the people on the island of their income, and then the people of the island who are renting, they're paying this much percentage of their income. It's a useful comparison tool. I've seen it in other surveys.
yeah, but the whole question has been here: how do you get the actual numbers that are comparable? Because, if you use what Daniel is saying, is probably the closest that comes to it. But I think in the long term, things like maintenance are huge, maybe houses. And if you take that out of it, then at a certain point
agree.
people
This is-
sell because they can afford to maintain their house.
Yeah.
You can't get it out the door without your stairs are broken. You've got to come with a couple of grand to fix that. Renters don't have to do that. It's
Yeah.
not a big cost.
Oh, so Daniel, sorry, if we can go back, just, what was that information that you were looking at, that you
So
said
the
didn't?
census has a shelter cost question that they
Okay.
report on, and so they say owner households, it's mortgage payments, property taxes, condo fees, and then it's the cost of electricity, heat, water, other municipal services.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense.
So
Yeah.
I'm I'm inclined to align with the census there. And I feel like on Bowen, it's really relevant to include utility costs. So I don't know how we do that. Is it the same question, and we lump everything in? Do we separate out, mortgage and rent, and then a separate question is,
Yeah, maybe.
what do you pay for utilities?
What are your average utility monthly
Yeah.
or something? Yeah.
But for
Yeah.
homeowners, you can add some questions, because there are lots of people that sit on land that is expensive but can't afford to live there. like West Vancouver is a good example, right?
Yeah.
So what drives them out of their homes is property taxes and maintenance. It's not the ownership itself,
Mhm.
right? So then if you say if you move out of your house, what is the reason? And you have maybe one or two questions, and that somehow makes you aware. But like if you drive around, you can kind of see which houses people are going to move out by just looking at them, right?
Mhm.
You know, oh, that's a knockdown, right? Now why is that house a knockdown?
Mhm.
It's a knockdown. People are aging. They may either not be able to live in it anymore. Maybe that's a question. Like how long do you plan to stay in your home? You know,
Mhm.
this is maybe something that is relevant for turnover.
I think that comes up later. I think there's a.
You know,
a
and
fair
and what so that if you talk about single-family home ownership,
Can we
yeah.
pause that? I think that comes up a little later. Let's talk about maintenance and that in a future question, because we've still got quite a few to get through, and it's been about an hour so
Yeah.
far. So let's keep plugging away. So Sophie, I don't know if that's provided you with any clarity. I guess our feedback is we'd like to see somehow utilities and
Right.
maintenance captured. Maybe let's leave it to you whether you separate them into two questions. And one question is about mortgage and rent level. Second question is your average utilities, maintenance, property taxes, whatever you're gonna do. I think it would be useful for us to have that data.
I'm interested in how, less about what the utility cost is and more if it affects their affordability. So I might
Yeah.
capture that
Okay.
relationship more than just asking what is their utility cost.
Okay, I think, what does everybody think? Like, do we want hard numbers and/or?
Definitely hard numbers.
So hard numbers, I think, would be important. And then if you want more of a qualitative, how does this impact your affordability? I think that's okay, but,
But I kind of like the question, why would you move out of your house? One, never. Two, it's, you know, aging, like I can't maintain it.
so
Three,
again, Fritz, I think it's coming up later. Could
Okay,
we,
good.
yeah, so why, I'm gonna write that down though. Why would you move?
out of your home.
Okay, so let's move on from this question about rent levels.
Just one quick
Oh,
point. If we're revising that question, I'd like to see it include utilities, because that brings it in alignment with these census definitions. You could include utilities, but you could also ask a separate question regarding utilities. So you've got something that's comparable to census, and then you've got the piece on utility costs identified separately.
Just that utilities as well will vary throughout the year, so that's another thing to consider why it's not included in the rent, because that's a constant. But we can include a separate question about utilities. I think that's the best thing that we can do in this case.
I think maybe revisit that and look in terms of what the census definition is, because it quite clearly says that utilities are included for both ownership and tenants. I think it would be more valuable for us to
Yeah, and
have it
certainly,
included.
as both a homeowner and a renter in the past, I've been very aware of my monthly utility costs, even though they don't always show up monthly, like, you know, refilling the propane tank or whatever. I have a budget and I know approximately what those are, so I don't think that's an onerous ask to average out your utilities.
I also think most people on Bowen probably average them out anyway, that we'd set up an equal payment system over the course of the year, because we are hit with $500, $600 bills in the winter months.
Okay, so they're thinking people can average it out, so we can just include it in that question.
Yeah.
I prefer for it to
Yeah,
be
so
included.
I think that's our strong feedback, is this, we think this should align with the census definition. Is that fair to say, everyone here? Yeah.
Yeah.
If not, Daniel?
I guess I just debated having it as a separate, like a second question that just says, what is your average utility or something? I don't know.
Include that?
Yeah, because then you'd still get the first question, which is like, what are people paying in rent? Which I think is
Yeah.
useful to know, like,
Yeah,
But
I'm
it's the
renting a
same,
house
the
and I paid
numbers
this
together are-
rent.
yeah.
But then in the analysis, you can add them together. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it makes it feel a lot more manageable for someone who's just trying to do this in a hurry.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out your utilities, especially for many of us.
If they
We
don't have it
wood
off the
heat,
top of their head.
Plus, we might have some oil or propane, and then we
Well,
also
and
have
firewood
to
is a
be-
reasonable thing.
Yeah.
So does that make sense, Maureen?
Yeah, makes
Okay, so sorry, Sophie.
Never mind.
Final answer. Could one question, as you've shown it, be for rent, or mortgage payment. Are we
Right.
agreed on that?
Yeah.
And a separate question B for your average utilities.
Okay.
Okay.
No property taxes anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
I think property tax is part of home ownership, like part of your mortgage payments. And
I think
tax-
mortgage
property.
and property taxes in that question, and then rent is that. Does that make sense, Sophie?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay,
Okay.
moving on.
No, final point. Pay for housing. You need to spell out what that means in the
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it does not include X, Y, and Z
Yeah.
in this survey.
Definitely explanatory notes for those two. Yeah.
Or, what was it?
So I think for the first one, you would say, what do you pay for housing per month? If you're a renter, it's your rent. If you're a homeowner, it's mortgage plus property tax. And in the second question about utilities, I think you like say water, sewer, heat, and I mean, I think, well, do you think firewood should be in there? Because lots of people spend a significant amount of money on firewood to heat their homes. So you could give those as examples of average utility costs.
You want to include firewood?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
It's a
very real.
significant source of heating for a lot of people on Bowen.
And
It shouldn't be, but it is.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, moving along. My comment on this one about percentage of before tax income, I actually think rather than asking it as a percentage, I would say, what is your income? And I know some people don't want to answer that. I think the BIRCH survey, we got a pretty good response rate of it. Again, because it's anonymized, it doesn't, most people are okay. I would find the census data, align it with that, and then you can do your own analysis on the percentage. But I think asking people to do the math on how much they do is a barrier to people answering this question.
Okay, so you think that they'll have trouble with the percentage piece?
Oh, I think just if you want people to answer this quickly, like on their phone while they're on the ferry, them sitting there and doing the math of how much money do we make and what percentage is that, isn't gonna happen. If you say, what's your income between this bracket, this bracket, this bracket, they will answer that in 2 seconds and move on. So I just think you'll get a better response rate if you just ask and align it with the census, it'll be really straightforward.
Okay, so you all feel comfortable asking the income question because we typically don't do that.
I think
I
it's good
think
to
so.
ask it.
And just have that option, I'd rather not say.
Yeah, exactly. Rather not say, we did it in our BIRCH's housing survey last year, and like I say, we got a pretty good response rate. There was certainly some people who said prefer not to say, and that's fine.
What was it?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was not insignificant. It wasn't like less than 50% or anything. It was pretty good.
Yeah, because even I was going through this, and yeah, I have to go, well, I make this much, and I divide it into a month, and I pay this
Yes.
much, and
Yeah,
then
I think that's asking too
Yeah.
much of people if we really want people to answer.
And it's such important information.
Yeah.
Everything else
Yeah,
is held up against that.
okay.
Okay.
Oh,
so-
sorry, we have a comment from our member of the public here, Robyn.
I would agree with Sophie that for Urbanics, that generally that's not a question you ask in an income, so that's just my input.
Okay, thanks. So next question, what can you afford to pay for housing per month? I think that's useful, like it's an interesting question based on, we're asking what do you pay and what is your income? Yeah, does anybody have any objections to that?
Well, it's a bit the same thing as homeowner or renter, so it has to be consistent with
Yeah,
the
so
one
maybe
before.
you'd have to clarify, what does that include? Does that include rent, utilities, does it include mortgage, property taxes? So again, kind of taking that same question. I mean, I just wonder, is this more about people's perception of what they're comfortable and want to pay? Because if we actually want the technical information of what can they afford at that 30% that CMHC or whoever says, I think we'll get that because we're getting their income level.
Yeah.
And we're getting what they pay. So I don't know that we have to answer it or
I
ask
agree.
this question. But if you feel strongly, Sophie and Simon, that it should be in there, I think you need to be specific about what you're including in that, just like we went over in the last question.
Yeah, again, I'd like to ask what your reasoning is for this particular question.
Well, because we weren't asking specifically the income, it's helpful to understand what people can afford to pay. But also, there might be circumstances where the 30%, even though people are paying less than 30%, could still be unaffordable due to other expenses they may have.
Yeah. So I would maybe rephrase it, what can you afford to pay, or what are you comfortable paying? And then just have a really clear explanation note, like we said before, what does that include, utilities in or not, property taxes in or not? Just be clear about what you're asking.
Great.
I
Okay,
also like this one, just that it has comments, so people could
Yeah.
provide comments here and say like, this is my situation,
Yeah.
this is what I
great.
can afford.
Okay, and then the next one, the renter, sorry, so if I'm just in the interest of time and moving along, I'll just kind of keep us going.
What is your rent or housing cost subsidized or reduced by a government or charitable organization? This is very straightforward. Any comments on that?
No, I mean, I think we could probably get that data from BC Housing separately, but I don't think there's any
necessarily.
harm in,
No, I think it's good to ask.
sure.
In that comment box?
Do you think a comment box is needed?
I don't think it's really
No,
necessary.
I think it's a yes or no, yeah, going along. Okay,
How satisfied are you with your living conditions? I'm seeing that, I think this box is working correctly.
yes, I think it was, I tested it
Can
out.
I say one more thing? Like, I kind of think that a lot of families actually subsidize rent for their kids, for their brothers and sisters. I mean, like, is it really true? Like,
Sorry, going back to this
if I
last
look
question.
at, if I look at the family I'm living in, right, with
Yeah.
my in-laws, that definitely happens.
Right,
If somebody can afford it, you help them. So is it the second question? Or is your rent being subsidized? Because like, how much does it actually relate to income? Like, I know some people that,
That's a good point.
yeah, how do you
Yeah.
do that?
So after.
so could we, sorry Sophie, going back to the last question, is your rent or housing cost subsidized or reduced? Question mark. Then could you put a category about, government subsidy, yes, no, charitable organizing, yes, no, family support,
Family,
yes,
that's
no.
friend. I would say family, that's
Family or
friends.
friends support, yes, no, and then other. Maybe other, leave it
Yeah.
open. Because agreed, like, and I keep using the example of myself. I think I provide probably a slightly subsidized rent to my tenant because he also helps me out doing stuff around the house and everything, right? So that's a relationship that we have
Yeah.
that's not, fully written, but that could be something here that maybe there are people that, oh yeah, I do work on the property, so I live for free, right? Or whatever that looks like. Robyn, did you have a comment here?
Just to say that a lot of government funding and programs related to people of all levels of income are related to subsidization, and it's something that's being worked on as we speak. Subsidizing people in need of affordable housing is an important component of government funding policy.
Okay, so in relation to this question, do you think we need to be more detailed?
Yeah.
If we say government subsidy, yes or no?
I think it would be helpful, yes, to
So-
break it down a bit
Into what?
into the categories you've just discussed.
Okay, great.
So-
So support for that,
How
so,
about four
Steph?
then? So it's government, yes or no, charitable, yes or no, family or friends, yes or no, and work on property, or?
well,
work
no, I
on-
think that's family or friends, or I think just say other. I think just say
Okay.
other.
That's my
And then I
comment.
think you could say, maybe Sophie, under the other, you could put a note, for example, if you do work on the property in exchange for reduced rent. Something along those lines, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that, again, that is, I don't think it's hugely common, but it's not uncommon on Bowen, that there's people who live on a property in exchange for doing work or rent or doing all sorts of things.
Five.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe put a comment box.
yeah, that's what I was thinking with other and
Maybe it's
comments.
just other with a comment,
Other
not like
comment.
leading, but it's like other and then.
And then, yeah, so Maureen?
I think it might be helpful to add employer as well,
Yeah.
as a category,
Yeah,
That's
employer
an
is
interesting one, yeah.
just to see how many people are reporting that they have reduced rent or as a result of their employment.
Yeah, okay. Is that all clear, Sophie and Simon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Great, thanks Fritz, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's going to be useful information to capture. So on this next one, how satisfied are you with your current living conditions? I'm just trying to
Is there a
see.
house on Bowen that doesn't need repairs?
Yeah, right. Hopefully not the really new ones.
Yeah.
Not BIRCH.
Well, yeah. My comment that I wrote when I looked this over was it was around the location question. I think, I just thought that, and it was the location of home and proximity to amenities. I felt those were a little bit, I think they need to be clearer. Like I had said, location, proximity to amenities, need to clarify and differentiate these two. I think what I was mentioning was, so location of home, whether it's near the grocery store or important retail centers, you saying what neighborhood you live in can tell you who lives near the retail center because we only have one. So it's not a terribly relevant question for Bowen. So I think to differentiate between the two would be one, proximity to services or something like that. Like, and that can kind of include, well, what did I put? Proximity to services and proximity to recreational activities. I was thinking of differentiating them. So, because I think there's lots of people who quite purposely don't live near the retail center because they want to live near other recreational things, trails, beaches, golf course, whatever the different amenities are that are on other parts of the island. And that's attractive to them, that's not a negative, but it's very different from asking about your proximity to grocery store. And so they're really two different categories of information.
I don't feel we really need a question about proximity to the grocery store or even quality of neighborhood.
Well, you know what I think is important is walkability. So for instance, like if, like in Bowen, there's this thing that if you don't put density in the Snugcove area, it's kind of useless, but that may not be true. So like how important is walkability for people? If you don't have a car, then, or you know what I mean? But like, what does it mean? Something, if you have a car, all kinds of things are convenient. Everything is nearby.
So I'm just going back to the question, how satisfied are you with your current living conditions? And it's a 1 to 5 of, low to high. So we've got quality of the housing, if it needs repairs and stuff, size of the housing adequate for household, cost, which is fine, accessibility, quality of neighborhood. Yeah, I think I sort of, sorry, I'm not skipping over you, Fritz, but I'm just sort of walking through to make sure this is the right area to ask that.
Sure.
Quality of neighborhood, I'm also hesitant about that. Does anybody feel that's a useful measurement for us?
It's not useful.
No, so I think take out quality of neighborhood because that's really not relevant for
Well,
us.
Deep Bay is definitely a higher quality neighborhood.
Oh, run camera, be careful.
And then I think maybe can you give us what with the location of home and proximity to amenities, what are you trying to get out of those questions, Sophie and Simon?
Related to the ability to access things without a reliance on your car, how there's such a thing as food deserts, which some of you may be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And that applies to Bowen, it's a little different.
Yeah, so I think to Fritz's point about walkability, and then Daniel and Maureen are both waving their hands here. Daniel?
I think I like how Robyn had phrased it, asking, like how satisfied are you with proximity to services, which kind of means Snugcove
Yeah.
in essence, and then proximity to recreational opportunities, because maybe you live in Evergreen, you're quite satisfied, you're not close to Snugcove, but you're really satisfied, and you moved there because you like the recreational trails and stuff, and so you're quite satisfied. Whereas if everybody says they're not satisfied with proximity to services, that leads us more to say, okay, we need more housing in Snugcove because that's where people want to be. But if everyone says we're totally satisfied, then we're going, okay, well that's not the driver.
Or in my mind, to reverse, we need to start putting services elsewhere on the island.
Yeah.
Controversial, I know, but that's what it is.
something like
I think
that.
that's really good. So I think that would be a more useful to separate those out. Would be proximity to services, and then proximity to
I said
recreational amenities.
I said recreational opportunities.
Recreational
But, I
opportunities.
don't know, but amenities.
Yeah, I think recreational opportunities. I think that's captures what we need.
Yeah,
Is
let's
it?
do that.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a whole piece in this that's just occurring to me, which is
Yeah.
around folks who are seniors, are no longer able to drive,
Yeah.
and who experience high levels of vulnerability
Yeah.
because of that. Like,
Yeah.
as you said, if you have a car, everything's accessible.
Yeah.
As we move closer to saying we need to have fewer of us getting everywhere with cars, that's where proximity to services, whether we move the services and have more, or we have more housing in Snugcove.
So does this, and so to your point of that, and I think that's really valid, and to Fritz's point about walkability, do we need to add an additional line? Like what would capture it that isn't captured in proximity to services? And that, is it a question about access or service by alternate modes of transport, like walking,
Or-
bus,
Or
cycling?
can you independently access your required services?
Yes.
Because that captures kind of, because like I think some of these questions are
Okay,
answered
yeah.
different
Yeah.
depending which neighborhood you're in.
So maybe,
Yeah.
so how can we phrase that? I like what you just said, independent. So are you able to independently access the services you need?
Yes.
Yeah, like one to,
Or are you, yes.
something along
Yeah.
those lines?
Okay.
Can, or if,
Well, because
or
it tells you
am I
something
getting
about,
agreement around the table here?
it tells you something about isolation as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was speaking
So
recently
maybe-
with a senior
Yeah.
who was having his driving test and was terrified
right.
because it meant everything, like everything could collapse if he couldn't drive.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that's very real for
And
quite
it's
a number
not
of
just seniors, maar like your family member fell from his bicycle.
Right.
Sorry?
One of my family members fell from his bicycle
Oh.
in the Netherlands, right? That's people that they fall from the bicycle.
You're dead.
That's what you do. But anyway, guess what? It's like a mini stroke,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Yes.
You know, and that doesn't mean you have to be retired. Some people have that much earlier in life.
Absolutely, yes.
So, okay, in the interest of time, Sophie, Simon, if you could perhaps add a line that would be something about people's feeling of independence in their home, and can they independently access the services they need, and I think, and the social connections that they
Yes,
need.
yes.
It's about services and social connection. I think that can be one question, because it can be about how independent and resilient are you in your home?
Yes.
And is it on that scale, and that's about accessing services and about accessing your social circles?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that's
Okay,
great.
wonderful.
Just
Two
2
final
points.
comments, okay?
I don't think we've captured the walkability
Okay.
element. Proximity to services, that doesn't say anything really about walkability. So walkable access, and I think it has to be called walkable access.
Yes.
Or maybe
Somewhere.
can I challenge you on that one and say, how easy is it for you to access services without a car? Something like that.
Yeah.
Because people could be riding their e-bikes, they could be taking the bus and be perfectly happy with that.
Yes.
That covers most.
Does that cover what
Yeah.
you want? So I think
Yeah.
something along the lines, Sophie, of how easy is it for you to access, well, I don't know how to word it, you get the point, live your life without a car, that kind of thing.
Given where you live.
Yeah, yes, and that's what it is, your current living conditions, that you can access things without a car.
Yeah, that's like,
And then
Yeah.
the second point, just disabled people,
Yeah.
people with disabilities. I know it's jargon, but some will be sensitive to the phrase.
yeah,
Right.
so we'll be sure to phrase it, that's not exclusionary.
Thank you.
So, moving on to what are the barriers, if any, that keep you from moving to other neighborhoods? I
So-
have this listed, but also an option that someone can fill out if it's not here.
So my thing was, what's the motivation in this question about other neighborhoods? Because I feel like on Bowen, it's more about you're on Bowen or you're off Bowen.
Yeah.
So you're either on Bowen, you know, and there's different neighborhoods and people sometimes move in different places, but I feel like a more relevant data point for us is gonna be about, like Fritz kind of had brought this up a few minutes ago about, you know, why would you be motivated to move? So I wonder if we can capture that somewhere here. Because like a big thing that's been happening, probably forever, but it feels acutely in the last 5 to 10 years, is lots of people have left the island because of affordability.
Right?
Or because they were given notice, as we said, out of a rental, and they couldn't find anything else in time and had to move off island. So for us, I think the more meaningful measure is on island, off island. And then
Okay,
what?
we can change this question to, we don't even have to use this question, we'll just focus in on, why would you move off Bowen Island? What are your challenges? And then, yeah.
No, I think they're kind of two. Like one of them is you need to move. Like
Why do you need to move?
You need to move. Why
Yeah.
is that? And it doesn't mean you want to go off island,
Yeah,
because people move 5 times from one rental location to another, right? And the other question separately is like, why would you move off island? Something like that. Because it's a totally different thing. It's a big decision. You're going to make that, right? And if it's just because for work or for the kids who are going to school or you know what I mean?
So, and the question originally was, what are any barriers? Or what are, so do we ask it a bit more generally, what are factors in a decision to move?
what are your factors in decision if you were to move off Bowen Island?
No, just why would you move?
I think for moving, and then, because it would be affordability, it would be mobility issues, because like, again, on Bowen, there's lots of steep driveways, there's lots of houses with tons of stairs, you know, all those kinds of things that are issues for people as they age in their home, or like they have accidents, or, you know, all sorts of things happen that start to make living in your existing home difficult.
Okay, so what would be a factor in moving, essentially?
Does that capture it,
Well, I
everybody?
think kids,
Yeah, school.
school.
That's a better question than this one.
Yeah, I think so, something like that. What are the different factors? And I think it would be affordability, it would be, you know, insecure rental, like being given notice, mobility issues, can't manage the house anymore, house is too big, downsizing, kids going to high school, that's actually a very specific Bowen issue. That often when the kids go to high school, people will move off island, either permanently or for a temporary time, while the kids are on the mainland in high school. And then I think just a general other box so people can comment.
So which ones did you have now? I kind of lost you there.
Sorry, me too.
So I had like availability of rental or something about that.
Okay.
Something about affordability,
Yeah,
mobility,
mobility issues, school,
I guess employment.
yeah, maybe employment.
Yeah.
Well, but maybe you can just say opportunities off island, because there are so many
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah, that might be a good one,
Yeah.
opportunities off island, that simply, you know, for whatever the reasons are, you've got a new job, or you've just, whatever, you have different, you know, needs and stuff. Robyn, comment?
Health.
Oh, health
Access
reasons,
to
that's really valid.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
very good.
access to health care or health reasons, yeah. Okay, is that enough for now, Sophie?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
You can fill in the blank.
Okay,
So just in the interest of time, I just want to make sure, are you all okay with continuing or definitely?
yeah, this is
Yeah.
super, super important, we're just gonna plow through. And then we'll touch base as a committee when we're done with you, and we'll figure out the rest of our agenda, but yeah, thank you for checking, let's keep going.
Okay, so then the next one, are you looking to rent or buy a home in Bowen Island within the next few years?
So my feedback on this was just to slightly maybe reword the question. Firstly, on Bowen Island, I think that's, sorry, it's just a very minor thing. And then mainly, because is this survey going out to people off of Bowen?
No,
No.
but I am going to try and capture people who have moved.
Oh, perfect, okay. So what I would say, just a slight rephrasing of it is more of like, are you looking to rent or buy or change your housing in the next 2 years? So not necessarily on Bowen, but like, I know, because the question just kind of makes it sound like we're asking people off island, are you planning to buy on Bowen or rent on Bowen in the future? Whereas I think it's more of a question of, are you planning to change your housing in the next 2 years? And what are you looking for? That kind of thing? Is that what you're trying to capture?
Let's do that, that's fine.
Okay,
And then the first two questions would then say, I'm looking at renting a home on Bowen, I'm looking at buying on Bowen. And
Okay.
then we'd say, I'm looking to buy somewhere else, and I'm
Else,
looking
off
to
island.
rent, yeah,
off island.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be useful to separate those out. Like, yes, I'm looking to move on Bowen, rent on Bowen, own on Bowen, and then I'm looking off island. And hopefully we captured in the previous question the reasons why, but yeah, and like this sort of references Vancouver Island. I don't think we have to be that specific. I think that might be a leftover maybe, but I think we can just say off island.
I was gonna say Greater Vancouver, this must be an earlier draft,
Sure.
supposed to say Greater Vancouver.
Yeah, and I think you can say that, but then you need to leave it also open. You need to add another one that's like or past Greater Vancouver, because you do get lots of people.
I think just off
I
island.
think off island would be relevant for us. I don't think there's any need, because again, people might move to Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, people are moving to other Gulf Islands. I know somebody recently who moved to Nova Scotia, actually a couple of people, you know what I mean? So like, we have people going all sorts of different places when they leave, so I think for Bowen, I'm getting nods, looks around the table,
Yeah.
that just simply off island is useful to us. I don't think we have to be specific.
And it's a terminology that we all use.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they're moving off Bowen Island.
Yeah,
and
moving
that's-
off
they're
Bowen
gone.
Island. Okay.
So do we want these to be able to do?
Yeah, and
One.
I recognize it's supposed to stay on. I spoke to Daniel before and he mentioned that. I think, this is an earlier draft, but that will be fixed.
And I think maybe adding a comment box in this one would be useful.
So that right now there's comments on each answer,
Oh, good, okay, yeah, that's good.
but maybe you should only be able to tick one, like Steph has just ticked all of those
Yeah.
boxes.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Just functionally on the survey, I think we should limit it that people can only select one of those. Is that, well,
Or maybe not, maybe I'm
because-
looking at renting or buying.
Well, that's it, right? So no, I think it's valid
Okay.
that you could do a couple different ones, because yeah, you might be looking to leave and you're like, I haven't decided if I'm gonna buy or rent in the
Yeah.
next place or whatever, so I think that's valid, yeah, let's leave it.
Hey, can you clarify something? What I've heard Sophie say is that she's trying to capture some people that moved off the island.
Yeah,
But yeah, well, that may be a good idea, but I don't know how it affects how you actually read the responses.
Yeah, this.
Because I know all kinds of people, even in my office, that would like to move to Bowen Island, either buy, or rent. And they may do that or not, but then you have to do a survey over whole Metro Vancouver, actually all over Canada. And maybe Europe too. There's a ton of people that like to move here. Now,
Yeah.
I think what I'm saying is you either include it or not. I feel that this survey is a Bowen survey to try to figure out what Bowen Islanders need.
yeah.
But if you open it up to off-island, what's the limit? Where do
I
you
think it's
start?
relevant to people who have moved off Owen because they couldn't afford to live here. I'm happy to
How do you
hear.
catch them? That
I have
maybe
no
1
idea
year
how
ago,
you
maybe
capture
5
them.
years ago?
Well, yeah, no, and I think we did that at our last conversation with them. We're, through Facebook and through other means, I think we're trying to put Urbanics in touch with people who have left, so that we can capture that information. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's relevant, like we said, to find out, are you, are you renting on island, are you gonna own, like, in the next 2 years, are you planning to buy on Bowen, rent on Bowen, buy
But
off
do you
island,
expect
rent on
them
island?
do you expect them to complete the same survey? Because then you have to go back to the top
Yes.
and figure out how people respond
Yes.
to that.
That's a good point.
This is question number one, there's no,
Yeah.
if you're getting someone off island, you need somebody
Oh,
who's
Steph, good
identified.
capture. So, I don't know if you caught that, Sophie and Simon, we just realized, question number one that asks you about the different neighborhoods, we should include an option there that says, I don't live on the island, but I used to, or I don't live there, but I want to, something along those lines. And then I think, yeah, and I think, Fritz, to your point, I don't think we can create a whole separate survey,
No,
but it
because-
would simply be that those people just answer whatever questions they can.
That becomes so selective, okay? If you
Yeah.
have maybe the one that moved off island, I can still see that in retrospect is interesting to know maybe,
Yeah.
because they have some knowledge about the island. But I think for every tourist that comes here, every second one probably thinks, oh, wouldn't mind living here. So I just don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't think we can capture all of it, but I think the idea, and Sophie, Simon, jump in if I'm wrong, is that this is a needs and demand study, so we are hoping to, in whatever way we can, get some information about what the anticipated needs are, because people are continuing to move here. So it's like, how do we figure out who those people are, what kind of housing they want? I think that's other than in addition to what current residents want and need and what all those things are, we're also attempting to understand.
The only thing you
what
have to
future
watch,
needs are.
like if that gives you
Yeah.
clear data, fine. It's maybe even a separate survey. But if you want to have your Bowen survey as accurate as possible,
Yeah.
I think you have to watch that you don't kind
Well,
of.
So I think
that,
having,
yeah.
just at that first question, having something like, I don't live on Bowen Island.
But
People
then
can
who-
tick it
who
and then you
receives
can,
that?
well, because if this is online, it's like people can share it and anybody might end up filling it in. So you want some way to then capture, so then even if you just want
You can take that
analyst,
out.
you can just filter it all out.
So I think that
But
would
you can
answer
capture
the
comments, so.
functionality in the survey, if we have that category, can weed them out and just look at the
Okay,
Bowen
fine.
data and then include them. And I think it's valid, because there's lots of people I know who have family members who've moved here, like a young family, and then the parents come over, or the reverse, right? The parents have moved here and then the young family comes. Like, I think there are those connections of people who actually really want to move to Bowen, but for some reason there's barriers.
Yeah, but okay, I'm fine as long as you can sort
Sort it out. Okay.
split it with the data, because
Yeah.
I really feel that there is thousands and thousands of people out there.
Okay, we're not talking though about everybody, we're just talking
No,
about
but they
people
don't
who
get the
moved
survey. So
Yeah.
the survey, the idea is that the survey actually represents something, like in reality.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think we got it. Okay, good. So keeping moving, Sophie, that makes sense. Question one, to add a category of, and you know what, Daniel, you're gonna send her that, so you edit it.
Okay,
Perfect.
yeah.
Done. Moving on.
So, looking into how much of the year do you live in Bowen? All year, just the cold months, just the warm months that come and go as the situation changes.
lives here just in the cold months.
I was debating this one. It's like, I know the situation changes, but I feel like there's a lot of people who live here part of the week, and I don't know how to capture that.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure. I know somebody
So-
for sure who does that.
Yeah.
Fritz. Yeah, well, now I know 2 people for sure who do that, actually 3.
So I don't know, Fritz, what would you have answered on that question?
Yeah.
Would you say you come and go?
I know my wife would say all year, because she's here 3 or 4 nights a week, and she's no way is she going to feel it any other place
Yeah.
where she lives, because that's not what she associates with.
Right.
And both of us feel that Bowen is our home.
Yeah.
We just happen to
Yeah.
work in town,
Yeah.
and we can't afford, or time-wise, not even money-wise, but time-wise, to come back every day
Yeah.
to the island.
Yeah.
So what's the important information we want out of this question? I think it's pretty clear if it's like full-time, summer only, or, you know, part-time,
Yeah.
seasonal. We could just say seasonal. I think
Yeah.
that might be a good way to capture it, full-time, seasonal. And then what would be useful for us as a community to know? Bowen is my primary home, but I have a secondary place that I stay
Something like that.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know
it's just
how
interesting
specific we
to
want to be.
capture
No, I
that,
think you
to
have
say,
to
like-
be more general. You say, I split time between.
I share my
more than one
time
home.
between Bowen and somewhere
city.
else,
Yeah, more, yeah.
throughout the year.
And I think there's a lot
Does
of
that
people
work?
who do that, yeah.
Because I think that differentiates between seasonal, who are mainly summer people, and then I split my time between Bowen and somewhere else throughout the year. So
Yeah.
that would capture people like you, who it's throughout the year and you're back and forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so is that clear, Sophie and Simon?
That change to seasonal residents versus the cold warm differentiation.
Yeah, so full-time, seasonal, and then I split my time between Bowen and somewhere else throughout the year.
Okay.
For people who,
And then I think I do not live on Bowen is still valid on this question as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Good.
Great. And then the next one, if you live in the current area, where do you live? What would be your preferred living arrangement?
I feel like that's kind of a
I think this is
repeat.
redundant. I think we just modified that last question, and we don't have any band housing here. I think we just strike this question. It's kind of a repeat of what we just asked about, you know, are you planning to move in the next 2 years? Would
Take
you-
this question out.
I think just take this question out. Yeah, we've added in enough. It'd be nice to take some out. Okay.
What dwelling type would you prefer to buy, rent based on your financial capacity?
What did yeah, I was gonna say, and sorry, print, maybe you could bring it up on screen for us, staff. Firstly, the apartment more than 5 stories. Do we want to include that? Because that's
we
not,
don't have that.
we don't have it, and that's really not on anybody's radar for Bowen at this stage.
No,
I know, I just laughed, you know, if half the people say that's their
I know
top
it.
priority, we're really, oh,
Well, this is
okay.
what I'm wondering, is
Yeah.
there any value in it, that a whole bunch of people want to live in high rises? So is that gonna?
Or do we just say apartment?
I think
Just
we
say
just say
apartment.
apartment, okay. So let's just say apartment, and I thought we should add in, and I think elsewhere you have it, duplex slash triplex slash floorplex. And then I think we should add in, we don't really have mobile home, but maybe something like mobile home slash tiny home
Yeah.
slash bungalow, like small cottage.
I would
If
say
we're
mobile
trying
home
to-
slash tiny home.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe.
Because I mean, it would be interesting to know the numbers. If there's a large number of people that want that, that's helpful information to have. And then,
like you can add to that detached secondary suite, or whatever you call it, coach house.
yeah, so
Because
maybe, that's what I was thinking, maybe something like, that's what I was, like small home, detached cottage, like, because I think there's people who would actually like, maybe not a tiny home, but a small, modest, freestanding home. Do you know what I mean? Robyn, I'm seeing you're waving your hand there.
Yeah, I just wondering, because we actually have bylaws against
Mobile homes.
mobile.
Yeah, we know that, yeah. For
Do you
sure.
know what I mean? So
Yes.
I-
Heard those.
Well, no, and that's why I think it's a relevant
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
because if we get a bunch of people saying, yes, we want mobile homes and tiny homes,
That's my comment.
that starts to
Yeah.
inform policy. Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, that's exactly
It's
it.
kind of a barrier, you
Yeah.
know, at this point.
Yeah. So,
Question for
Maureen?
Sophie. With single detached home, tiny homes are effectively a subcategory of
Yeah.
that. Do you have the ability to, like if somebody were to choose single detached home, could you ask them, would you like to live in a tiny home? Can you do that?
So the tiny home is an interesting piece because that's an entire lifestyle. It's not just choosing to live in a small space.
Yeah, but if we defined it, I mean, what we're really asking about is, would you be able to live in a house that's like 750?
Well, that's why I'm thinking, it's like, I think there's a line between an actual tiny home, and there are definitions now around tiny homes, and I agree with Sophie, it is really a lifestyle thing. And there's a difference between what I would describe more as small homes, pocket neighborhoods, cottages that are in that 5 to 1,000, 1,200 square feet, that are modest homes, they're small, manageable homes, versus a tiny home. I think they're different.
I would stay away from the tiny home phrase. Let's just go, well, we have secondary suite here. We could add in something like a whole, a small single detached home, and then
maybe that's what we do. Thanks, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think maybe single detached, and then you say large family home, single detached, small cottage, slash bungalow, something along those lines. So describe them differently because they are two different things.
Could you put like under 1,000 square feet and over or something and have a
Sure. So
have a
what would
size?
be the number? My
Like
feeling is
1,200?
the number is like 1,200 and under.
Yeah.
That's my feeling. Like 1,200 and less is kind of modest, small living.
And that's our detached secondary suite
In
size.
there you go. So that lines up well. Robyn?
I think a key thing here is we're trying to promote diverse types of housing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you should be careful with how you categorize this question,
Mm-hmm.
because this is the question that promotes diverse housing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. So I think, and just I'll say quickly to Sophie's point, I actually, and if nobody objects, I really think we should keep tiny house in there because there's a lot of talk about it. There's people who are interested in it. I think we should capture it, whether anything ever actually comes to fruition on it or not. I feel like it's a valid question to ask. And this one's interesting because I don't know if any of you tried it. It's a ranking thing, so you drag them over. So if people don't want tiny house, they'll just leave it over there and they won't choose it.
Yes.
But if we get a significant number of people dragging it over there and saying it's a priority, I think that gives us information to go on. So
That's what
I feel like I'd rather put more options and see what the outcome is than limit the options.
I agree.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Well,
Allison, did you have
That's
a further-
exactly-
that's what you were
that's
going to
exactly what I was
say?
gonna say.
Fritz, and then I'll go to Maureen.
Well, there's two things here. I think one of them is simply, it's kind of the size you're looking for, which you can normally describe actually in bedrooms. That gives you normally a good idea. Like if somebody lives alone and says, oh, bachelors may be okay. If you need 2 or 3 bedrooms, that's what you actually tick off, right? And then it's more the form of housing, and the form of housing has more to do with lifestyle, convenience, mobility, accessibility, and that is like, is it a house, or is it level, is it not level, is it, what are you trying to get out of this? Like, some of this, like, if you read this, maybe people never say that they like to live in a row house, but they like to live in a townhouse, but they're kind of the same, you know what I mean? And if it's an apartment, does that mean it's higher up, like it's, what is it? Is it ground oriented? Is it like, what is the question? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. So
Like-
we're trying to capture, I guess, what people would prefer, and agreed. Are numbers of bedrooms a factor?
There could be one question, and at least you know that. If nobody's looking for 3 bedrooms, then maybe you only have to build 2, and you can normally build about 1.5 times more of those, by the way.
Yeah. Maureen, you had a comment?
Every time we've asked the tiny house question, we get tons of people saying, yeah. And I don't know what to do with that response because I don't know what question they think they're answering. Whether it is the lifestyle issue or whether it's the smallness or whether it's the newness. I think actually asking about the square footage of the house is more meaningful.
So could we put a tiny category under 400 square feet? Would that be more useful? Like I'm thinking we go large is 1,200 plus, small 400 to 1,200, tiny under 400.
I'd be fine
Would that be
with
clarifying?
Yeah, because that clarifies it's about the size of the house rather than the lifestyle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not totally certain about it because I don't know how people understand these numbers. Like if you're an architect, you probably know that 900 just may fit 3 bedrooms, but they're shitty, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
But 1,200 will be really good. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't really get it. Like, I think that people have needs, which is many times expressed in bedrooms because it helps.
Mm.
Because if people buy a condo, they either buy 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom and have good reasons for it. You know, and we noticed that with the houses that we designed, that the number of bedrooms are key to lot sizes. But I think, like, I say it again, what are you trying to get out of the question? What do we need to build?
And I think so, I think they are separate. So one is square footage, and I think most people are pretty in tune with square feet. Like especially if you bought, you're very in tune with it, and I think even renters are pretty familiar with it, and agreed. I've done a design for a 1,100 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom place. And I've had some people say, that's crazy, you could fit that into 900 square feet. When I was a kid, I grew up in, this and that. I've heard other people say, oh my God, how can you fit that in there? That's disgusting, it's tiny, they're unlivable. So it's like you can get the whole range. So I think asking those square foot questions of single family, adding in, just kind of to review here, row house, townhouse, adding in duplex, tri-quad, adding an apartment. I would like to see us add condominium, and I know that that's I know it's a really small distinction, but it's like, I want to know what the demand is for condos on Bowen, and versus apartments, which are rentals, right?
But
Or does that get
I would
captured
say they're
in
not. I
the
would say
rental?
apartment is building
Is-
type and condo is
It's
ownership,
ownership type.
right?
Okay, fair
So
enough.
they're, yeah.
You
I'll
say-
take, so I'll
The
take that
condo
out.
townhouse. would be-
And then if we keep mobile home, I think that's again still a valid one, secondary suite, room in someone's house.
I think we should have tiny home in there.
Well, no, we do have tiny home in there. It's being captured as in under single family. And I think then a separate issue, and again, do we go to a separate question, is more about bedroom numbers. So maybe Sophie and Simon, can you tell us in other work that you do or other reports that you've seen, is it a relevant question to ask specifically about bedroom numbers? And why I ask is, BIRCH as an organization, we have another private developer that's building rental, we have a few larger multifamily projects on the go, and it would be useful information to know what is the demand for studios versus 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's becoming a more important question in the recent housing studies because the average family size is shrinking, which affects how many bedrooms are typically needed. Although Bowen Island has a significant young family population, so I can see it being relevant here.
Okay, so is it fair that it's a separate question? So this one's really about the typology of the building and everything, as we just went over, and then a separate question about how many bedrooms.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, Daniel?
I was just looking right now we ask like how many bedrooms in your current place, and
Right.
we ask whether the size of your housing is adequate for the household.
Yeah.
But so you're right. We could say then like,
But it
how
says-
many bedrooms does your
Yeah,
Or-
like if you plan, what dwelling type would you prefer? How many bedrooms would you prefer?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's useful because we might have people who live in very large houses and who actually would prefer to live in a simple 2-bedroom place, and I think that's useful information to capture. Okay.
Great, okay, and then moving on to the next question. What kind of housing issues do you believe Bowen Island should focus on?
Didn't we
What did I write notes here? Anything?
That's fine.
Built on. I think my only comment here was to add an other box, so there's a little more, but I don't know, what do people feel?
But
Like,
is
so
this-
the question is what the municipality should focus
Yeah.
on.
We had a survey from the municipality around housing only like a year ago, which
Oh, no,
focused-
well, the BIRCH did one about a year ago, but you guys did the island survey just months ago,
Yeah.
right?
I think that's on this
And
agenda.
it very much was asking these kind of questions, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
So
But
should
is
we?
this
yeah.
rental or is this, it doesn't distinguish that? It should say.
Yeah, it's housing issues in general that Bowen should focus on. So I would say then, is it availability of rental stock? Like, should we look at what the housing surveys, the island surveys said?
But you can first ask, do you think that Bowen Island municipality should focus on rental housing or providing more houses for the market? Because like, if something is too expensive, what does it really mean?
Yeah, I don't think the
Yeah.
boxes actually speak
They
to the question.
Yeah, I don't think, and they're not, I think the data that would come out of this isn't necessarily useful for us.
No, but if you say for a rental, I can say that's very easy to fill in. But so what kind of housing issues do you believe Bowen Island municipality should focus on? Now, they may say, some people may say rental or affordable rental, or are they going to say more single family homes?
I think we
Or
have
not.
answers to these questions
Yes.
Do we
over and
just-
over again.
So,
Yeah.
Sophie, I wonder, can we strike this question and can
Yeah,
you?
let's strike it.
Okay, and then you guys can do some look back at the island survey that was done recently and at the BIRCH survey that was done last year, and I think you could get some data from that would answer this question for you. Maureen?
But I think there's a related set of options that would be helpful to ask. And it has to do with policy and Bowen Island municipality. So the questions would be things like, should Bowen Island municipality relax the OCP requirements to enable additional housing diversity? Should Bowen Island
Yeah, I like that.
municipality offer incentives to developers? I don't know if this is the actual, but it's that kind of question where it's something that is within the municipality's capacity.
Yeah.
We can change the land use bylaw, we can change the policies, we can change the OCP, we can look at incentives, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
So could I, to wrap this up,
That's good.
could I ask maybe that Maureen and Daniel and whoever else you feel might be appropriate from the municipality side, maybe looking at what you've just asked, maybe you could put a question with a few things together and send them directly to Sophie.
Sure.
Is that okay? Because I
Well,
think,
fine, but I
Yeah.
think some of these questions, if you go through that report and you get true answers to those questions that Maureen just
yeah,
proposes, right?
yeah.
I actually think those are really key. So that, and it is not just slip a few in. I think that
No.
you almost have to go through the OCP and try to figure out, well, at least the rental part,
Yeah.
at least the residential part,
Yes.
right? And figure from, well, okay, do we feel hesitant updating the residential part of the OCP or not?
Yeah.
Well, you probably notice there's a lot of yellow in here,
Mhm,
and
yeah.
that council may want to change that. So, but then if you want to feel the support from the community to do these things, then I think what you do, you actually you basically go through the residential part of the OCP and try to figure out what now is restricting
Yeah,
delivering
I
what
agree.
Bowen may need, and then you feel more empowered
Yeah.
as a council.
yeah. Daniel?
Like, this seems like a hard question. I think at the end of a survey, it's all about like, what's your household need? And then
Yeah.
it's like, and then you're saying,
And then
what are the
bullets.
policy approaches we should take to address this?
Yeah.
Whereas it seems
Yeah.
like that's a step two, where you say
Well, it
this is
depends.
one, and then you analyze it, and you say, okay, based on this, it seems like these are the range of
But
policies.
maybe you can make the questions more, that they don't sound so official. Like, do you think the municipality should provide more rental housing? Do you whatever, like a number of questions that come out of that may give you an indicator, right? Because then the report becomes more a tool to actually achieve something.
Look, a question you could ask would be, sort of under that umbrella, would be, do you think density should be restricted to the code?
Yeah, I was thinking that
That
exactly.
would be a really interesting question
Yeah.
to get an answer to at this point.
Yeah.
I'm always a bit afraid of the word density, but yes.
More housing
More housing.
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
focused
Or-
exclusively on.
Plain land
Or,
housing.
or more forms of small housing, something like that. You know what I mean? Like, you have to introduce it kind of carefully.
Or should development processes be simplified, or whatever?
So it sounds like
I'm
almost a
really big
whole
fan of-
section of this survey that
Yeah.
has to do with asking the islanders about policy, current policy issues. I like the idea of asking about this flexibility around changing the OCP. Because I think
Yeah.
that's still in the consciousness of the community,
Mhm.
and if we sense
So-
there might be.
Like when I went through this, right, one thing that keeps striking me, that the OCP is kind of divided between this is Snug Cove and this is the rest of the island, right? Which I think is outdated. But because there's all kinds, like for instance, could there be some modest, careful, whatever, small scale densification in specific parts of the island, to address local needs or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Is that true enough? And if it is true, then it breaks through this huge barrier that
Yeah.
you know.
And I think, just to jump in, what you were saying about being careful about the wording, I'm a big fan of talking about diverse housing, and I think we've used that a lot, as opposed to say the word density, which is really loaded and if people are afraid of it, and you might just get flat nose. But if you say, hey, we want to introduce, are you in favor of introducing diverse housing in outside the code? That's an interesting answer, right?
It's not quite the same thing though.
What
I
do you
think in
mean?
fairness, one has to address the fact that we are looking at higher density in the Cove and in particular areas of the island.
Yeah, but that's where you have to, okay, so, you know, maybe some of this, like if you get a draft back, right, and maybe we go through those questions, maybe Maureen, of course, can deal with council, maybe bring these questions forward too, but if you first would read through this document, and then for the next meeting, and when we maybe have a draft, you know, from the consultant, then we may probably know a little bit better what we would want to ask, you know?
I mean, if we asked a question about mobile homes in this, would you support them or not? And say 90% of the respondents say, sure, why not? That is useful and new information, and we could do something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Comment from Robyn?
I think this question maybe could refer to the current municipal policy planning decision-making process, like relevant to what's the own context of what's current and what's relevant to that conversation, rather than so that it can be focused on current policy decision-making and planning decisions
Yes.
related to housing.
Yeah. Do you have
Rather
anything
than
specific?
well, I think the question should be changed to acknowledge that, you know, current.
Yes. So be specific about that this could relate to current planning.
And this
decisions.
might be a question that should be in a different place in the survey, because all the survey kind of refers to this. And it would be good to know how people on the island feel about current issues that in the home context.
Yeah. So I think that reinforces what we've been talking about. So how do we move forward with this, given that it's 11:36? We've been going for a couple of hours. How do we resolve this final question? Because I feel like it actually needs a little bit more time and thought. Is it something that we can take offline? Maybe we leave it with Maureen and Daniel to draft something. I think you get the gist of what we're getting at. And then if you feel that you need feedback from the committee, if you want to send it to us for some feedback, and then we can get it to Sophie and Simon. Does that make sense to move forward and wrap up? Okay. Yeah, Maureen, final thoughts.
And it came up in passing, ownership models, condominiums, co-ops, co-housing. There's nothing in here that talks about that. Whether it's people's interest, whether municipalities should be in some way supporting.
Can you put that in what you're going to do for this final question?
Sure.
And then, I think it's been captured. I only had the one thing I had in my notes that I can't remember if it's been captured somewhere. It's kind of about aging in place and options to downsize, because that's also another thing that I know I've had pretty direct contact with people who have left the island because as they were getting older, mobility issues, all those kinds of things, they weren't. But maybe that's been captured with some of the questions already. So, okay.
Indirectly it has, but we could make it.
It might be worth making it explicit, because, okay. Okay, good. I think, have you, Sophie, Simon, do you need anything clarified or anything more from us?
At this point, I'm going to edit the survey and then send it back to you all for the final review, and then release it as soon as I get the okay back.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for your hard work.
Yeah, thank you for all your comments. I think this is going to be a great survey.
Yeah, really good. Okay, thank you so much.
Hey, take care, everyone.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to take the topic of ferries, I'm going to run down.
I know, so that's what I'm just realizing. What do we want to do, folks? I think let's defer adoption of minutes, let's defer election.
Let's just
Why?
defer.
Okay, adoption of minutes? Yeah, okay, adoption of minutes. We missed public comments, I think that's fine. Can we defer election, or?
Yes.
Okay, let's just defer that. Can we defer reviewing the action items, because there's really no,
Yes.
I mean, there's no time.
Yeah.
So what we've got is the secondary suite report, that I had, and then the OCP review. So Fritz, I hate to do this to you, can we defer your OCP review to next meeting?
I would like it I would like if you read it, or
Yeah.
at least see what's marked yellow.
Yes.
And then see what you think of the green and the red.
So I think that's what we should do. If everybody, if we can give everyone homework,
Yeah.
that for the next meeting, if you could have read through that, and I would like to have a really robust discussion on it next time. And Fritz, so you know, I know you're walking out the door, we'll look through my report, and I decided to leave the OCP off it, because I do think it's its own separate thing. So this looks at
Yeah.
the secondary suite and the land use bylaw review, and then I think let's next time, because I think we'll have to adopt this to go to council now, right?
Yeah, you can.
And, oh, so you can't leave,
No.
yeah. And so then, next time we'll talk about OCP.
Well, I
and that
don't
can be a
mind
separate
to, I
report.
don't mind to adopt it because everything is fluid anyway, so like I can't read it now anyway, so,
Okay.
you know.
Okay, good.
No, it's
Is there
20
any
to
like
12.
Huh?
It's 20 to 12.
And work.
Yeah, I'll be.
Actually, what about quorum with just without Fritz?
We will
I'm
have
just saying
part
is
of
that
that.
you either read
Okay,
it thoroughly or not, right?
Yeah, we can't do it thoroughly.
So Fritz, you can go.
I'm just
We
thinking
don't
about you
need
walking
for
out
quorum.
of the
I don't
ferry.
mind if it's adopted, because like,
Okay.
then we probably make more progress than if not, you know?
Yeah,
So
okay,
this is my
good.
rationale.
So that's it. If anybody wants to just quickly look through it, I mean, it's, what I did was take, I don't think the preamble summary really changed. I just took what we talked about with the secondary suite bylaw review and put in the actual points from the current bylaw as like the bolded headers, and then pretty much said, I didn't edit really anything, I don't think. I think I added a bit of rationale, actually, that's not true. I did, I added some rationale. So maybe we can read through that. I'm just checking it, or I know Fritz has to walk out. Can we stay
Well-
for another 10 or 15 to get through this?
Yeah.
Sure.
Allison?
My
Okay.
brain is sort of non-functioning at this point.
I know. Do we want to actually just take a break for 2 minutes?
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna go get some water and just let's stretch and take a breather, and then we'll come back for about 10 and review this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was
That
a
was good.
marathon. I'm glad we went through it, but holy.
Yeah, water.
Yeah, no, to really read this and feel like we're just perfect here, I don't know if I can do it before I leave.
Yeah. Feedback. Yeah, camera's still on. That's nice though, I love these thorough sessions in general. I'm always concerned that people are really reading the agendas or not and commenting and just really dig in.
Yeah.
No, we needed to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
So can you just remind me what we're doing here? We want to adopt,
We want to adopt this report,
so,
which is 6 pages.
so that it can go forward to council at this time?
I think so because my recollection of why we needed to do it now was Daniel's putting together his report, and we wanted it to be in line with his timing. So that's what the push was.
So we refer to the appendices with the review of the OCP and the LE.
Oh, thank you. So we need to review OCP from that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just read it on the ferry or whatever, or tonight, and if you have any comments, I'll let you know. And
Okay.
if it makes sense to include as you do, and if you think it's all
You
good
can
the way
say
it is, then that's fine too.
Everyone. I learned that on my courses.
That's good.
That's a little bit of loophole.
Thank you, Fritz.
Okay.
Have a good
Thanks so
afternoon. And thank you for the Christmas card.
Oh,
The
yes.
renovated,
Beautiful.
the renovated offices is lovely.
Yeah, you know, it was a pretty big deal for us this year.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, you have we used one of our favorite contractors, and it didn't help us one bit.
Oh, no.
It was slow. We didn't quite get the crew we wanted, and going on with me, you know.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes, right? And then, you know, with all these architects, and stuff,
I can only
they
imagine.
can only make it worse, right? See, that ferry is now arrived, so now we better get on with it.
It is a speedy little ferry.
It is,
Oh,
you know?
yeah, how fast it is. It's faster.
I was counting all kinds of delays, and I'm freaking away.
No.
No, it's been actually pretty good.
Okay, guys.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Friday.
Treats.
You may not get on that one. It was pretty loaded.
He's walking.
Oh, he's walking.
Oh, good, okay. Okay, so we've got one typo. So yeah, if you want to sit down and have a look through this, I think, like I say, the only thing that changed, I added the headers and then maybe some of the rationale.
So, Daniel, this is going to be part of the report that you take to council as a discussion starter?
I was assuming it was a report like that the committee was presenting to council.
Okay.
The timing is to be aligned with your report though?
Well, I think I'm trying to get a committee of the whole scheduled, because I've got a few things now that are backed up to go to committee of the whole with council, which would be like, because I don't think I can do it. I've been hoping in my head for like the 27th, but I don't think that's going to happen before that council meeting, so it might be before the 1st February council meeting. And we're not gonna, but this can almost be, I don't know. Like, I'd been thinking, okay, this would be, like, I can put this into our report template, but it would be a report from the Housing Advisory Committee to council.
And would you provide commentary on it, or? I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
there are a lot of really potentially impactful suggestions here.
Yeah.
And how to present it, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get stuck.
So it doesn't get
Yeah.
stuck, or it doesn't get overreaction from
Mm.
either the community or council.
Council. What, something happened, I haven't been on that many committees. What happened, for example, with the bylaw, or the business license report? That's kind of one that's on my radar from a couple years ago. Was that, did like the committee come and present that to council at a committee of the whole, or was it presented and council read it and took it into consideration? Like, what was the procedure? Because, and then staff would have had something to do with that as well.
Ultimately, ultimately Kathy wrote a report after about a year or so of working with it and working with staff.
Okay.
And the committee had made a batch of recommendations, and then Kathy and the rest of staff went through and said, we support this, this needs to be done later, we need to think more about that.
Okay, so it kind of filtered through staff. They came
Yeah.
from committee, went to staff, they took that on board and
Yeah.
filtered it and then came up with something. So is that what,
I think that's what this is looking for too. This is
Okay.
looking for, in a sense, it's like the committee's recommending to council to direct staff to prepare a land use bylaw amendment to make these changes or something like that.
okay.
Is that, so is, am I in the
Okay.
right direction here? Do you want that to be changed to directing staff?
Okay, no, I guess that's right, because you don't want to, but I would just say that they be included in a land use bylaw amendment.
You don't want the word bylaw
Not-
twice?
Well, I think just not tying
Are
it
you
to,
sure?
not tying it to the update, but just saying in a bylaw amendment.
Amendment, okay.
Because my worry with any, like I've been working on this land use bylaw update stuff. My worry is it just, scope gets too big and it all dies.
Right.
Yeah, they don't want it to be too big. And this is pretty, like the secondary sweep one's pretty specific, and I think it's very much in line with what you're thinking as staff anyways. And I just provided some of that rationale, so there's some explanation. And then what have I got here? The land use, what is probably the big change, we'll look at it now. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about the secondary suite the first 3 pages. It's pretty, like I said, it's pretty in line with what we looked at before. I mean, I can go through it really quickly if you want, but,
A typo, top of the page, residential,
okay.
under point 3, complementary, with an E rather than an I. It's just a typo.
Okay.
I just need to read the rest of this. Question came up last night. Point 6, the secondary suite not exceeding 90 square meters. The new building code. Is there a maximum size in the new building code? And what's the C rationale below in number 6? Is that supposed to be number 7?
Probably, yep. Switch these around a little bit.
We did the review of the land use bylaw here, so
Yes,
that.
but not OCP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, no, the revision would say have no limit to
Huh.
floor space of a secondary suite.
So it would just be the usual constraints
Mhm.
that would
Yeah.
apply.
It would just be a self-contained dwelling unit located within a building or a portion of a building with some other stuff in there, but no size restraint.
So could you have a house that was, it's gonna sound stupid, 2,000 square feet and 500 was the primary residence and 1,500 was the secondary? Could you do that kind of thing?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Probably then I would flip it and say, well, that
Yeah.
sounds like the secondary is the 500 square foot one.
I think calling them primary and secondary at this point are arbitrary. Like they're
It's not meaningful?
no, it's really saying, I think that being secondary, meaning that it's 2 self-contained spaces in 1 dwelling unit, as opposed to, and Daniel, jump in if I'm wrong, a duplex, which is 2 independent dwelling units in 1 building.
Right.
So I think that's where the term secondary comes in, is that it's owned by the same entity, it's 2 separate self-contained spaces, and they lighten the fire separations and all of the code things because they're within this 1 entity, they're owned by 1 person, versus a duplex, which is 2 dwelling units, they're attached, they're strata owned, they're whatever, they're independent of each other. Is that making sense?
So this is like a secondary suite is a self-contained dwelling, this is the code change stuff. Self-contained dwelling unit that is part of a house containing not more than 2 dwelling units, including the secondary suite.
Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, so this, like, under the building code, having 2 secondary suites within a house means they're not secondary suites. So I know for the Carino one, we're allowing it,
Interesting.
but by code, they're not gonna have 2 secondary suites. It's gonna be a building with 3 units in it. So for them to get building permits, they're gonna need the full separation.
Yes, interesting.
Yeah.
So that's the distinction. I think the language of secondary is really about code and those relaxations, as opposed to 2 dwelling units that have different fire separation and code
Yeah.
needs.
Okay. Council's gonna have a hard time getting his head around that,
Yeah.
Okay,
because they won't have been engaged
Mhm.
with all of this.
yeah.
But I guess this is saying we no longer would have a floor area. That would be in policy saying, well, we don't care, we're allowing your building, your primary building on your lot can be a certain size. And however you want to allocate that is up to you. So if you could build a 5,000 square foot house in your lot, which many places could on Bowen, it would say, well, what's immaterial to the municipality, I guess, if this changed in the land use bylaw, if that's 1,000 square foot secondary suite and 4,000 square foot main house, or if it's 2,000 and 3,000 split, or if it's they're each 2,500, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think that's what we're saying here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, this is something that would be part of a committee of the whole, probably sometime in February, that the committee should take responsibility to present, and you'd be there to.
Yeah. I mean, so when, like the APC did the conservation development piece, right, which then when it came to council, like David spoke to, as like,
Okay, so would you want me to
I
speak
think
to
so,
this?
but then, see, I don't know then if, like, the goal for this would be, this would go to a council meeting. Like, with the minutes from this meeting, there'd be a report that come with it, the recommendation, looking for that independently, or is it like, I should just lump this in with, and when I get a planning committee of the whole, we'll have a bunch of topics, and we'll say this is one of them. It's like a separate thing to talk about.
I think I'd rather have it go to a committee of the
Yeah,
whole.
okay.
Why?
Well,
Just to talk
I think you
about.
need to talk about it. Like
Yeah.
you said, what's the difference between this and that? What's the distinction between that? I feel like you have to talk that out.
And with the presentation of the conservation development policy, my feeling was it wasn't
confused
the
between
best way to introduce it, because it got some significant criticisms, and the rest of council didn't have enough background to,
Yeah,
about what had gone on.
yeah,
Whereas if this goes in more gently in a committee of the whole,
yeah.
I think that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah.
And if committee members could be there, and
Yeah.
So if I'm available, I'm happy to attend
Yeah.
and discuss the report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or be available to discuss it.
because it's hard, it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. But I think then still, like, this is still the committee's recommendation, that we adopt it now, and then maybe what I would do with it is I would just stick it in a template.
Yes, that's
So
why I
it
kind of
looks
like
like
that
our
front
report, yeah.
page. So yeah, it should be
And
monitor
then
formatted.
I'll be working with Hope, and I'll try to set up a committee of the whole, and I'll say this is one of the topics I want to talk about, it's
Okay.
like secondary suites.
So I think the secondary suite thing, if that's clear, and then the land use bylaw, I just really reduced it down to like, what was it? 5 points. Because I just found a lot of them are overlapping. So one is suggesting introducing cluster zoning, which we talked about before, and I have all the examples. I just specifically asked Steph not to print them again, because it was another 8 pages that
Yeah.
we didn't need that many copies of. So I have still those examples from other communities to add onto this. And I took your suggestion, Maureen, of adding, I put a rationale, considerations, and I put impact and effort.
Yeah,
It was like,
I
and
saw
I looked back at Jada Bassey's presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if you have feedback on whether, like, this is just my estimation of whether they're moderate, high, simple, that kind of thing, so.
The only thing I would say is, sort of streamline the words you use. So for example, in effort, at number 3, you have low, and then effort,
Oh, thank
moderate
you.
to simple,
Yes,
and
that's a mistake,
like, which
yeah,
is low, which is simple.
thank you. Maybe I'll low, I think low, moderate. makes
Sure, that
sense.
makes sense. Yeah,
Okay.
simple is a little uncertain.
Yeah, agreed, thank you. And I think because there was some language, I did look at Jada Bassey's report, and 1 or 2 of these were kind of similar to that, so I did use her numbers, but yeah, let's keep the, agreed. good
That's the
catch.
terminology.
Yeah, low, low, and what's this last one? Low to moderate. Okay. Good, okay, so that's consistent. So, cluster zoning, introducing rental ready, so I sort of broke this out because it showed up in a couple of places and it wasn't clear, and I had a definition. Anyways, I thought maybe that's the suggestion, is that you introduce this concept of rental ready. What does that mean? How do you define it? And that's its own thing. And the whole idea of rental ready is that it's, a space that's basically totally prepared to be a suite
Yeah.
and just needs very minor modifications to make it into a suite in the future. So it's a very simple renovation and makes the house really flexible and adaptable in the future.
So are you what are you doing here? You're introducing a definition for rental-ready spaces in the land use bylaw?
That's what I'm proposing. I'm happy to be talked into something else, but that was my suggestion, is that in the review of the land use bylaw, you introduce that as a definition. Late in the next subsequent points, it comes in as to why that's relevant. But I felt like first you had to introduce it as a definition and understand what it was.
See, I already thought I would put it after the first
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise it's like, we just do that, we're like, well, we allow secondary suites, so
Right.
we'll just build a secondary suite and not build all of it, I guess.
Okay.
Whereas we're saying, well, the point of doing it is we would sort of incentivize it or bone it or something linked to it.
So I do have, and I'm happy to move it around, I'm not attached to this at all, but in my rationale it says, this is another tool in the toolbox for new development, new construction, provide for more secondary suites in the future, and an additional mechanism for bonuses see below.
Okay.
So I kind of reference it next, so I'm happy to move it if it makes more sense, but the reason why I put it first was I started talking about it in these other things, and then there was no definition for it.
Sure.
So I'm like, I really need to,
Yeah.
so that's why it's ended up in that
Right,
order.
right. So we need to add something here.
Okay,
So introduce the definition for rental-ready spaces in the land use bylaw. And what you were talking about was incentivizing, and incentivize their something, their construction.
and, okay, yeah, and make use of it, I'm gonna type this forward, and make use of it. Oh, shoot.
Because that's the
I
point.
think incentivize is a good word
Yeah.
to use.
Okay,
here.
so include a definition of rental-ready spaces in the land use bylaw,
And incentivize their construction.
and
And I don't know what that means,
their
but that's what
construction.
we want.
Yeah, and I can say see concepts below, or see items below. Because it does come in where where it can be incentivized and how it can be used. And it's, so that's good, I think that's really clear. And then I sort of define what it is, this is where a secondary suite is roughed in and fire separations in place with minor renovations needed. And the rationale, and sorry, this was a bit late when I was writing this, it's just another tool in the toolbox for new developments, new construction that provide more secondary suites in the future, and an additional mechanism for, maybe I'll say instead of bonuses, other zoning mechanisms, because that's what I refer to below. Okay.
Just typo in considerations A, neighborhoods.
Yeah, so number 3 is introduce floor space ratios in all zones, or maybe I should, well, we'll let you interpret that, whether it's more zones or all zones. And it's the same kind of thing, it's another tool that you can then use to, with other zoning mechanisms to incentivize people.
I have to get going.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Well, do we need a vote?
Okay.
Yeah,
To be able to let one go.
All
Are
right.
people comfortable to say, yes, let's accept as amended, and if you have any thoughts on it, you can email me.
Or we continue.
I'm okay with that.
Can I just suggest rewording of the recommendation?
Yeah.
Bring that up.
I keep getting knocked off this for some reason.
We'll need your vote.
Yes.
Yeah. So it says that the Housing Advisory Committee approved the recommendations made in the secondary suite bylaw review report as presented at its January 8th meeting, and recommend they be included in the land use bylaw
In a land use bylaw amendment?
amendment.
Land use bylaw amendment?
Maureen, what did you wanna,
And recommendations as amended,
okay?
or somewhere as
The
amended.
review report as amended.
Yeah.
As, not and.
Yeah, and recommend to council, we gotta get their attention here.
Yep,
To
you're right.
council.
That they
these-
be included
Or
in.
do I recommend that council direct staff?
To direct staff
Okay,
Okay, recommend that council.
to include discussion of the report in an upcoming committee of the whole.
Council
nice.
direct staff to include,
Discussion of the report in an upcoming committee of the whole. Maybe discussion of the recommendations.
Okay.
Upcoming
and not this whole one?
No. Oh, yeah, we need that.
We need that. And
At its meeting, and recommend that they be included in an amendment to the land use bylaw, yada, yada, and that council direct staff to.
No, we got rid of the wrong thing.
hold
Okay,
on,
we'll get there.
what's happening?
Yeah.
And do we take out as presented, sorry, I'm
Mhm.
sure you're,
Yep,
instead of as presented, as amended, is that,
and amended.
And
Also,
amended.
How do we change it?
okay.
So.
Oh, you threw me under the bus.
As presented and amended, okay, recommending clean land use bylaw. In that middle one, do we need to reference staff at all, or is that okay, that it's just?
Oh, yeah.
Recommend that council direct staff to include them in the bylaw?
I feel like this should go last, because it's kind of
Yeah.
the result of the conversation
Yeah.
of the committee of the whole.
Okay,
And, or recommend the council include discussion of including the recommendations of the report in the land use bylaw amendment in an upcoming committee of the whole meeting.
I think it was, in discussion of the recommendations, not the, well,
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you, I don't know whether the words are important.
No, it's just simply and include discussion of the recommendations at an upcoming committee of the whole. And recommend that,
Staff, or council direct staff, or whatever.
I think just recommend that the recommendation.
Recommended, at the recommendations.
Bring it down.
be included, proposing approve. Well, we're recommending all of it.
Recommendations in the report,
That these recommendations might make it slightly better. Or that the report.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it just be and that these recommendations be included, because you're just recommending?
Yes. And that the recommendations be included, yes.
Yeah.
These recommendations be included in the land use bylaw amendment.
Included or taken into consideration? Because I don't think we can say they
Yeah.
should be included,
Yeah.
it's more, we think you should take these into consideration
Be
while
considered.
you're doing the land
Be
use.
considered.
Be considered
Yeah.
Considered.
for a land use bylaw?
Yes, yeah.
Consider. Or, yeah. Yeah.
The, rather than or for
I would think
inclusion
of.
in the, no,
But it's just a
no,
land use bylaw.
okay,
Yeah.
it's an amendment
okay.
to the bylaw.
Or be considered, is it an upcoming land use bylaw amendment? Is it happening, or we don't?
We don't have like,
There's
I
no
don't
guarantee.
council direction to say.
Okay, I think that's, I think we've, yeah.
Drop the recommend at the beginning of the second.
That
clause.
council.
So just that council, and then make a third clause, which is and that these recommendations.
Okay. Now, we need to, there's no ask here. We approve,
Yeah, and then
and then just council direct staff, there's no ask council direct staff or recommend the council direct staff.
Well, so is it just that the first one, that, and recommend that they do these two
Mhm.
things? Like,
Maureen, I just took it out, but it doesn't have a part there, oops.
Recommend that council, okay,
but then it'd be and recommend that.
and recommend that
But, yeah,
the report, I think, because it's
Yeah.
recommend, and the last one be and recommend that the report be considered, be taken into consideration for something like that.
You like take into consideration, I like considered.
I'd be sure, considered fine, yeah. And do we have to say an action item though at the beginning and recommend that third one? I know it's a lot, but
Sure, yeah. Have to recommend.
because like we can say that we want it in there, but it doesn't really matter. And is it recommended, council direct staff to consider the report for
Sure,
land use
why
bylaw
not?
assessment?
Why not?
Sorry,
Yeah,
these are,
yeah.
recommend that.
We always check with the staff,
Yeah,
who's gonna be pointed out when.
I'm never sure if the committee should be just recommending to council, and then council would
Sure.
direct staff, or if the
Okay.
committee should recommend.
So recommend that council consider the report, recommend that the report
Be considered by council
thank you, be considered by council
for
for
a land use bylaw
a land use
amendment.
Who would,
What?
It's
I mean, I guess
so
it's like-
powerful right now, I'm really, okay.
Well, I'm open to feedback, this is, I'm
Yeah.
not great at these recommendations, right?
So recommend that council, go with the direct,
Yeah.
recommend that council
Yeah.
consider the report for land use bylaw amendment.
Yes.
Yeah. Consider the report for, yeah. Because I mean, that really is what we're asking.
Yeah.
Sure, okay.
And if you want it to be actionable, then they will direct staff.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that same report, I don't know that,
Do we say included in the report?
either way, I don't care.
Either way.
Okay, so it's all saying the same
I think
thing.
we're done.
Yeah, we're good.
Right.
Okay, seconded, all in favor, yes.
Okay.
And we're done. Thank you very much, Allison, we are dismissed at 12:11.
See you guys.
Go.
Okay, send out an email as to when the next meeting is.
It says
Oh,
here,
stupid.
February
February
12th,
12th.
Okay,
Wednesday morning.
all right.
Yeah, I'm so disoriented. Everybody is. These Fridays and Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And this kind of like,
It's my fault.
giddiness. It's great.
Okay.
Oh, camera.
Oh.